Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill, and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer himself, Double J, Mr. Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Conrad, how you doing? You know, I was thinking about this before we got going. What do all the other hosts call you? I heard the impersonation of JR, but what are the other names? Because you're Conrad to me. Do they call you?
I'm just Conrad. That's it, man. Conrad.
Oh, when JR gets hot at you, how does he say it?
Connie, and he yells it. So.
Can I get a little impersonation just off the top? I'm pretty good this morning. I really am.
You know, I'm not a good JR impressionist, but I will say when he gets fired up at me and calls me Connie, it still tickles me, because it's like, how can you be mad at somebody who's calling you Connie? Like, once upon a time, I used to keep ice cream cones in the office in the freezer. And I told the lady who sat up front, I said, hey, if we ever have a pissed off customer come in and they're fussing, this guy won't call me back, or I already sent this document before, just regular customer service issues that you run across time to time. If somebody comes in upset, go to the freezer, bring them back an ice cream cone. And she said, okay. And I saw her hand it to him in the wrapper once. I said, nope, you unwrap it to him and you hand it to him. She's like, why is that? I said, well, it's hard to be pissed off licking an ice cream cone.
As you say, you're committed that way.
I mean, I'm just saying, at that point, you can't be like, listen, I'm here because I'm real upset. And nobody called me back. Yes, this is actually pretty good. Hypothetically, so-and-so, I mean, ice cream just makes everything better. So anyway, to this day, next time you're in the office, check the freezer. I bet there's some ice cream cones, just in case somebody comes in and not having a good mood.
Mad at you. Damn you, Conrad.
Yeah. So my thing is, I wish I could hand in that moment, Jim Ross, a ice cream cone right through the screen. Like,
yeah.
Hey, you will not be pissed off with an ice cream cone. It's hard to have a bad day with an ice cream cone. It's you can't even be a badass. Can you imagine like a Stone Cold promo in '97? He's stomping around, pissed off, eating an ice cream.
The attitude bar.
Can't imagine.
Oh man,
we're on the heels of 3 shows so far. Episode 1 was Holding Up Vince. Episode 2 was Fired on national TV. Episode 3 was Remembering Owen. And I got to tell you, man, I've been doing podcasts now for, 6 years every week. And I'm overwhelmed with the response so far. What's the response you've been hearing?
Overwhelming, but that's such a simplistic term. Well, one that me and you have chuckled about. Hey, Jeff's a likable guy.
Yeah.
I do think that's kind of amusing, that blurring the lines of, man, what a heel, or whatever it may be. You know, you called me the fast forward machine, all those nice endearing terms that I've come across over the years. But you know, the Owen episode, I did a interview with Slam Wrestling Bob Kapoor, and as I was telling him, recounting, Conrad, what me and you did, it just sort of caught me off guard that I didn't get choked up, but I sort of felt that wave of emotion because Bob, there's a connection, and that surprised me. I I just did not expect it. And, I texted you later on that afternoon and I said, I'll sleep good tonight.
You said, I need a nap.
Yeah. And that was, that was a little bit surprising. So going on this journey, one, I'm super happy of today's topic, but, therapeutic may be too much of a stretch, but maybe not. On certain episodes, maybe it will be therapeutic, but telling the hold-up story and basically, the preposterous idea of, I always joke with, okay, was it a 45 or a 38 I held him up with? And,
right.
Reliving Vince, quote unquote, firing me on national TV. And that brought back all the memories of, if he's going to pick me out, is he going to shoot an angle with me? Probably not. Well, maybe not. All that. But then the Owen episode, very emotional. But as I said here today, a week later, I hope people listen to it and feel the emotion on the positive side of what a wonderful human being Owen is. And who knows? Owen is forever. Owen is forever. Sort of what you said on that out. Maybe that sticks. You never know.
I hope so. It's when you and I finished last week, I said, man, that wasn't a podcast. That was an experience. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend you go check out episode 3, Remembering Owen. Today, we're going to be doing something a little different. But before I talk about today's episode, I want to let you guys know what's coming up. I know that when we first announced the Jeff Jarrett podcast, a lot of people assumed, they're just going to talk about Memphis or they're just going to talk about TNA. We're 3 episodes in, really haven't talked about any of that stuff so far. But we are doing a bonus episode. We're going to watch Jeff Jarrett's first ever wrestling match over at adfreeshows.com against Tony Falk. And I might even make you sit through your first promo, which was interesting.
Painful. Very, very painful.
But I wanted to sort of preview what we've got coming up. We are going to talk about the genesis of TNA, and I felt like starting your own promotion and how it all came to be warranted more than just one episode. So today's episode is going to be called Not a Boat Story, sort of debunking the narrative that's been out there for a long time and really sort of laying the groundwork for how TNA or Total Nonstop Action came into existence. We'll continue that journey over the next 3 weeks as well. June will really primarily be dedicated to TNA, but we're going to be back talking about WCW and the WWF in the month of July. On July 6th, we're going to have an episode called Hulk Screwed Hulk. That should get the internet talking. It's all about Bash at the Beach 2000. Victory Road 2006 will sneak in on July 13th. And then we're going to talk about walking out on Vince McMahon. Of course, the famous story from In Your House 2, that'll be coming your way on July 20th. And then we'll finish up the month of July on the 27th with the WWF debut, an episode we're calling Ain't I Great? But we've got lots of fun stuff coming in August, including meeting Dixie Carter. In September, we'll talk about selling the Panda Energy. In October, we'll talk about flirting with Hulk Hogan, Bound for Glory 06, which is a story and a half. And of course, that infamous Austin 316 promo. There is a ton of really fun stuff coming down the pike. And maybe if you're old school, here's a little tease. In December, we're going to talk about Super Clash 3 and when Jeff's dad bought Dallas. So we're going to be all over the board. But for the month of June, we are really going to double down on the genesis of TNA. And we've got some very special stuff planned. You're going to get it early and ad-free, and there's some video that you will not want to miss over at adfreeshows.com coming sooner rather than later. But the narrative, the reason this episode today, Jeff, is called Not a Boat Story, is for years and years, we've heard that, well, Bob Ryder, I think, as the story goes, invited you down to a fishing trip, and I think your dad was there and maybe some other folks. And that's where TNA was first sort of hatched as an idea. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Let's first pick up where your story left off in WCW, though. Episode 2 here on our show, Fired on National TV. You asked the props guy, hey, can you ship these guitars to me? And you're getting your guitars and you're going home and you've got a beautiful lake home. And now we can actually heal up from some of these nagging injuries. What is the plan? We'll call it April of 2001. What'd you do for those next several months?
First, Connie, I'll say that you just went through our calendar year of my world. I'm excited, but geez, exhausted. That's a lot of ground to cover. But
it is.
When you were navigating your way through, that was interesting to hear how you laid that out, folks. Some of that is brand new to me, not all of it, but definitely some of it is. But no, I see. I'll say this: I see where you're going, brother. I see where you're taking us. But anyway, what was the plan?
Yeah.
I referenced that about the shipping the guitars, and there were folks in the WCW office that, hey, Jeff, there's some not a stack, several boxes of promo picks. Do you want any of you or anybody else? That kind of sort of small chit chat. I'll say for the I don't know, for March and April, but basically, when things were shutting down. But I can vividly remember coming home and just waking up and knowing no airline tickets, nothing on the agenda. And I'd been going since 86 outside of, and you referenced it, the end of 95, but I had a really bad back injury that, no surgery, but man, it was painful. I weighed too much. I was too heavy. And that was painful. So that wasn't any time off. It was also essentially, there wasn't any rest, so to speak. But what I had, forward thinking, we'll call it April. And I knew through at least October, November, but I wasn't even really thinking time frame. I said, I got a summer, and I had moved on the lake. I grew up on this lake, Conrad. I don't know if you knew that. My dad had a house here way back when I was a kid, and used to come out and visit him as a little boy. But anyhow, growing up on the lake, but then got to move back over here. But I'd never really spent any time because I traveled. I mean, 99 when I bought it, that was the WWF run all through the summer. I was never home. 2000 was WCW. And then here comes 2001. I was going to get to have some free time.
Right.
I mentioned this right before we got started. I said, you're going to might chuckle at how I'm going to start into this, but Jeremy Borash was a buddy of mine from WCW Live. We referenced that. But JB is, and we'll get into that definitely in the early TNA, well, all of TNA, how creative and how talented he was. But back then we were buddies, but I always admired Jeremy's skill set. We hit it off as friends. And he was getting paid too. So he was on that same time frame. And we called the summer of 2001 the summer of no worries, because I would call him, hey, man, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. No worries. He lived in Atlanta at the time. So I said, drive up. I had jet skis. We hung out on the lake. We did a lot of nothing. And so I didn't really have any quote unquote plans. I was just going to take it easy. And I did. And I spent the better part of 8-10 out of pontoon and jet skis. And that's all I did. I worked out. I got, really regimented, I'll say, on my schedule like I am today, but a schedule of get up, go to the gym, come back, fix a cooler of food, go out on the water, come back in, get more cooler, more food, and go back out. But that was really what I did for, a couple of months. My birthday's in July. So that was the first birthday that I was, home, and I had two little ones, but still it was a lot of R&R, to say the least.
A lot of family time.
Yes, without question.
So two follow-up questions. One, you mentioned, hey, the WCW office people were saying, hey, we got all these boxes of promos. Do you want any? Did you get a box of your old WCW promos?
Sure did. It's the one in black jeans, WCW logo. I'm sure I've still got some of those somewhere around here.
We got to dig those up for adfreeshows.com.
It was the simple promo pic. And actually that photo was taken that'd be October 18th, 1999, the day I arrived at Nitro. Black jeans. I went out later and hit Buff. But no, that photo was snapped, and that's the one they used.
That's tremendous. What a cool story. And then secondly, you said you grew up on the lake. Your dad had a place on the lake. Is this the house I'm thinking about that maybe had a famous previous owner?
And a few holes in the walls? Yes. Any country music fans out there remember George Jones and Tammy Wynette at once were married. And George, by God, he was thirsty, and he didn't want to get behind the wheel of his car, so he got behind the wheel of his riding lawnmower. And that is a long ride to get him a six pack, but he did. But it was George Jones' house. And I told you this last week, Conrad, yours is bigger, obviously much newer, but it was on the lake. You're on a beautiful a bluff overlooking, but it's the floor plan. And I'll just tell the listeners this. I was at Conrad's house downstairs doing cardio on the treadmill. And I just sort of had this like, oh, wow, this floor plan sort of like my dad's old house. Oh, wow, I'm really in the room that would have been my old bedroom downstairs. It was kind of, it's kind of freaky, Conrad, but no, that's the house. Yes.
So
Bobby Bear was in Cordova. You probably don't even know who Bobby Bear is, but Bobby Bear is in the 50s. He was country music. He was the rock star of country music in the 50s, Bobby Bear, and he was his neighbor. So, and it's about 5 minutes from where I'm at right now.
You continue to impress me as being the most interesting man in wrestling that you just casually drop. So yeah, anyway, as a kid, I lived in George Jones' house. My dad bought it. It's like, what? That's wild. Let's keep it moving here.
If you knew who Bobby Bear was, that would really pique your interest for old school country. Yeah, I mean, he was a big megastar in the 50s.
You talked about being regimented, with your schedule. What are you doing, or what are you thinking is your next step? You sort of teased on an earlier episode. Well, it was around that time I got my contractor's license. You actually did that in 95 though, right?
I did that at the end of 95. Correct. So that was inaccurate, but yeah, because I had those 2 breaks. But during this time, I can remember talking to, not anybody in specific. It was like, what's going on here? And I really had no interest because I was just sort of chilling. And JB would keep me up to speed. And there were, different things on the horizon that you heard of different things. But at the end of the day, like I am today, I'm a huge television watcher. I watched Raw. Was always dialed into it, but, checked in on nothing like the internet is today, but, the slow modems and all that kind of stuff, but a little faster in 01. But I wasn't really, that's the first time during that break that I saw actually Jackie Crockett is a little wrestling trivia. He sent me a thing, I think maybe from David, that it was a streaming, not wrestling, but it was a streaming kind of, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. But anyway, not a lot of specific wrestling planning. I'll say that. Chatter, yes. Planning, no.
So did you you mentioned I was watching Raw. Were you watching Raw because you were just a big wrestling fan? I mean, obviously you are a wrestling fan. Or are you watching Raw because you still somewhere in the back of your mind thought, well, I mean, I obviously wind up with a WWF run.
To this day, Raw, SmackDown, NXT UK, AEW, Impact, AAA, I love, CMLL. I'm a junkie, and I watch clips on Instagram. I watch YouTube clips. You should see who I subscribe to on my YouTube. It's all kinds of different things. I may not sit through it all, but I get a little bit of all. So I watched it first and foremost as a fan, but also, like I think I referenced this. I don't know if this was actually on the podcast, but and I tell you what, this podcast has given me an even more appreciation of growing up in the business and knowing that ship is completely full. It's the worst time to come in. I mean, the absolute worst time to come in when you're loaded, because not only does everything sort of blend together, but the guys that are already there that are entrenched, they're more on guard, and really Vince and the creative team, their job is super difficult with loads of talent, still some guys sitting on the sideline. So I knew for all the reasons above, it wasn't in my future, so to speak, immediate future. I'll say that.
I can't speak to the fact that you're a wrestling junkie. You were here in Huntsville last week. It's Wednesday. We're hanging out in the den, just catching up, me, you, and Cassio. And about 6:59, I lost track of time. You said, damn, son, are we not going to watch AEW? Turn the TV on. So we had just been catching up, and you're like, are we not going to watch? And it was like, okay, here we go. So let's talk about, as you're sort of weighing your options and seeing what's out there. I hate to just brass tacks it, but you're comfortable talking about money. You eventually realize, hey, these checks are going to stop coming. And, being a dad and 2 little ones and a big old house on the lake, I got to have some income coming in. What did you think would be your next move? Or were you just legitimately not worried about it and knew God had a plan and thought something will present itself?
You'd have to talk consciously and subconsciously. Consciously, I knew that, look, there wasn't, well, quote unquote, WWE money or WWF money in Puerto Rico, but Puerto Rico and Dutch was down there, Japan. I knew there were options, but also knew that, somehow, some way I've made a living in this industry. Something I didn't have that conscious thought of, oh, I'm going to go start a promotion. Not certainly. And I'm trying to keep it chronological. Not at this time. Also my faith though, it's going to work out somehow, some way. Like you just said earlier, I went out and got my contractor's license, into 95. My dad, through his, career, he has been able to pivot, in a lot of ways like none other.
That's really where I was going is I just assume since it's not like, okay, well, if this don't work out, I got no backup plan. You've rattled off your dad's had 100 different businesses. So worst case scenario, you can go talk to dad and say, hey dad, which one of these is hitting and where can I be a player? Right.
And he sort of encouraged me. He did a deal with BP Oil of re-imaging gas stations. That was really an oversight job that show up, make sure the workers are there. It's a turn and go. It was high turnover, 100 stations, 150 gas stations. So we'll just say the construction business, obviously he owned a lot of land, putting in road, water, and sewer, which I knew nothing about, but I was never afraid. Now, I'm going to go back to my dad, my grandmother, roll up your sleeves and learn the damn business. It's on you. So I didn't really have like, oh boy, what am I going to do? And I had been pretty, I bought this house at the right time.
Yeah.
So I didn't have my quote unquote monthly expense was not overwhelming. I've never been a car guy. I'm just not. I'm a house guy.
Yeah.
I've never been a car guy. So from a financial perspective, I wasn't thinking I need to get paid. Didn't we cover this on episode 1?
A little bit.
Money. I'm kidding. The paycheck. Yeah. I'm kidding.
Well, I can speak to, obviously I'm in real estate and I mean, I don't want to share numbers or anything, but from when you bought it to now, your house is probably worth what? 5-6 times what you paid for it?
5.
Yeah. So you did good, Jeff. You did good.
Lucky, Grace, lucky.
There you go. So when do you think your Time Warner contract was set to expire? Just sort of fill in the gaps. We know the last Nitro is March 26, 2001. When do we think, okay, the gravy train ends here? So
my contract, you touched on earlier, I went to the WWF in October of 93. And that from the next 8 years, October was always my October 17-ish.
Yeah.
That date was the rollover time. So I know it could not have been before that. I want to say, because I negotiated with Bill Bush, we were the dotting I's, crossing the T's. I had that, we'll call it addendum. I got paid per house show. I got in, my travel, and that was somewhat of an add-on as well. And Bill Bush was getting his feet wet in the whole process. I tried to jog my memory on this episode because I knew we were talking about the summer. Diana Myers, it came to me about 2 hours ago. That was the attorney. So anyway, I want to say November-ish. It could have gone into early December, but it was mailbox money every 2 weeks. So November-ish was when it was going to, quote unquote, the checks quit coming.
So you had about 8 months to sort of get a plan together and figure it out. And you mentioned a minute ago, Diana Myers, she was your contact with Time Warner if you had a question or something like that?
There wasn't a lot of quote unquote questions. It was the merch that they sent me, the guitars. That was about it. As far as reading the contract, my attorney basically said, look, you're going to get paid. That they can't provide you with work. There is no breach language in here. Go do what you want to do. I think I had a couple of conversations with Carlos Colon, who ran Puerto Rico. But there wasn't anything specifically that I needed to reach out to Diana, but if I'm not recalling something, that would have definitely been. We always got along well. She understood, quote unquote, the wrestling world better than most, and she was great to work with. So if I did have a question, it would have been to her.
Now, you said something there I want to follow back up on. There was no language in your contract about breaching it. I guess
when I say, yeah, I mean, like if I went to work, they're not paying me. There was no like, hey, you can't go work over here because there's no really infrastructure for you to be going to work. It says you're getting paid out, period.
Okay. So I guess my question is, if you wanted to scoot down to Puerto Rico and do a shot, you could.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But now during that time, you just decided, hey, let's let absence make the heart grow fonder. Let's spend some time with the family. Let's enjoy the lake. Let's just chill out for a bit. Right.
Yes, without question. And I'm, I don't recall a specific conversation, but I'm sure I bounced things off my dad in a 3-minute conversation in that, hey, just knowing the industry, the timing wasn't right to jump on board. Although I learned real quick this is a little wrestling note. When I went from the WWF to WCW the first time, I noticed real quick the style of work. I'm not talking about working toward hard camera, but I'm really talking about the laying out. Sean taught me that in a lot of ways. Owen taught me that in a lot of ways. The agents, Jack Lanza, Chief Jay Strongbow, different folks, obviously Pat's at the top of the list. He would really get specifically, but I noticed the difference in that. And so that was one of the things that I was like, okay, how are the WCW talent going to get acclimated to the flow? It's different. I may be getting too deep into the woods here.
No, you're not. Jericho wrote about it in his book and said that he had been wrestling for a long time when he got to the WWF, and he realized very quickly, I don't know shit in terms of I don't know their style. And so guys were saying, oh, he's the shits and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, he had been heralded in all the newsletters and all these other promotions. He'd wrestled in Mexico and Japan and WCW and ECW, and the WWF was like, I think he made an analogy, and I might be misquoting here, but it was almost like if you're right-handed, it was like writing with your left hand. You know what to do. It's just really hard to like, wait a minute, I've always done it this way. And so you sort of had to get reacclimated.
Very well said. And, when I look back on it and sort of just getting the vibe of it, and look, Vince McMahon has no peers, in my opinion, the greatest promoter, but he didn't teach that style, in my opinion, Pat Patterson. So when you think about the influence Pat has had on the industry, I don't think you can overstate it.
Yeah.
I just don't think you can.
So talk to me a little bit about, and I realize we're getting super granular here, but I think all of this stuff is fascinating. When you're, you got this downtime, and I know this is a weird question, but I've had these conversations with Rick where, hey, I was on the road for 30 years. And then when I, got sent home after WCW and I was home, Beth and I couldn't live together anymore. It was, they still loved each other. They still wanted to be married, still wanted to be a family, but their family unit had grown accustomed to, dad's gone, mom's running the house. And now dad comes back in and he's like, no, we're not doing it that way. Even though it had been happening that way for years and he just wasn't there to know. Their family dynamic grew accustomed to him being on the road and her taking care of the house. And it worked. Now all of a sudden he's there and he doesn't want to be not there. So he tries to be active and present. And it really created some problems. Now your kids are much younger than his were at that moment, but was that an issue going from being a road warrior, for lack of a better term, and being on the road all the time to now I'm home and Jill just looks at you and it's like, why are you here? What are you doing? Does that exist?
Not really. No, Jocelyn was 5 and Jacqueline was born in November of 2000. So, I mean, she's not even a year.
Yeah.
So, that takes up a lot of mommy daughter time, an enormous amount. So me and Jocelyn, but no, the broad stroke you're painting, there was never any of that. Just, she did her thing. I did my thing. When I say that, she worked out and trained and all that, but also it's the kids and mommy time and all that. But there was never any of like, what are you doing here? What's your name?
Well, let me ask too, because there's two sides of this. Not just, hey, you're sort of upsetting the household dynamic, but a lot of times guys have said, "Oh, I kept my wife away from the business," blah blah blah. But some of the guys, like Rick Rude, I think, is on record saying, "Don't let your wife around the business for a variety of reasons." But one of the big ones is she'll know we're not really working. We're having a good time with our buddies. And it doesn't feel like this stressful thing. Don't get me wrong, the travel sucks and blah, blah, blah. But you had been a part of this fraternity of wrestling for 15 years at this point. You had been, developing a camaraderie with this group of guys, and you're making towns and you're meeting at the hotel bar and you're riding down the road and drinking a few beers, which obviously we shouldn't be doing, but hey, things happened back in the day. And now, no, we're changing diapers and getting on the jet skis. Do you miss any of that? A lot of people listening to this feel guilty, like I'm at home, but I feel like I should be at work, or I'm at work and I feel like I should be home. And now here you are really with no option, and you've got to be missing some of that fraternity and camaraderie, right?
I can't, I really, I don't think I ever recalled, man, I miss hanging out at shows. For the camaraderie. Now, the career, yes, as we get into the late summer, the itch on next steps, I think, would be a natural progression, but not really the camaraderie. And I kind of think, again, that growing up and, the first wrestling show I went to, well, obviously my dad, and he made me sit in the audience, which I was like 7, 5, whatever it was, Nick Goulas TV. But that as far as, so I rode with my grandmother, then I pulled the ring and then referee, then I started wrestling. So the fraternity has always, yes, the boys, all that. But I don't really think, to specifically answer your question, I don't ever recall saying, man, I really miss the camaraderie.
Well, here's what I mean. Like when you're out there on the pontoon boat, do you pick up the cell phone and call Brian James and say, "Hey man, come spend the weekend"? Because you just miss your buddy, right?
Well, and that was, I'm just trying to think who else was around, but JB would come up, and I've got, I'll call it my gym buddies. There's a group of us that over the years that we've stayed, and we've bounced from gym to gym, but so always stayed in contact with them. But no, it was the lake and chilling and grilling steaks and that kind of stuff. There was not, family time, and I'm saying extended family time as well. My dad, all that kind of stuff. Jason, my little brother.
Well, let's talk about the name that is going to become a theme for this show. And he's probably sort of the unsung hero of the idea of TNA. It's Andrew McManus. And the first time I think I remember seeing his name mentioned in regard to professional wrestling was him putting together a tour with Dennis Rodman and Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake. It was the main attraction, a 19,000 seat arena in Sydney, Australia. Did you hear about this at the time? Wait a minute. What are they doing in Australia? And I guess to add context to this, Australia has been a strong wrestling territory for a long time, back to Barnett, back to Dundee, somebody that was very familiar with Memphis. So it's not like it's strange that it's happening in Australia, but it is at least interesting that it's Beefcake and Rodman in 2000, right?
The first person that told me about that, do you have any idea who told me about it?
I don't.
Vince Russo.
Okay.
I'd never had heard any real thing about it, but when I sort of heard the card, first we'll address Australia. Australia went dark for a lot of years, and I wasn't really aware of that till we went down there with WCW, and then going back down there and seeing it was the product was hot. WCW is hot, and just thinking, wow, this used to be a territory, and learning the different. Now, years ago, Bill Dundee, who's actually from Scotland, but came to the States via Australia, George Barnes. So I'd always heard of Down Under, but the territory and how, in a lot of ways, red hot. It's the original WCW for you historians out there. But so it was red hot, and then it died off, and no money, and it's a long way over there, and there's just nothing going on. Then WCW went back there. And then when I heard Australia, I'm like, wow, so that's a market. That's interesting. But then I'll say, look, I was in WCW when Rodman and all that came through, but he was definitely garnish. You know what I mean? He wasn't the stake. Hulk and Scott and Kevin and all that, but what an attraction it was. Sure. And I did that with all, I mean, huge, but I just was like, he's your main event. I didn't get that. I didn't. And then in the same conversation, Russo was talking about, it was a financial disaster in no certain terms.
Well, we're going to talk about the tour, but I do want to mention, because this is one of those wrestling things, right, Jeff, where you hear, oh, there's this wealthy businessman who wants to start a promotion. And we hear it all the time. And hell, people heard it a few years ago about Tony Khan and thought, it's another boat tale. You know, it's another bullshit story. And it turns out, wow, AEW is really a thing. But people had a reason to believe that McManus could pull this off. He had handled tours for Fleetwood Mac, ZZ Top, Kiss, Lenny Kravitz. So when you hear all of that, you think, well, now maybe this is different. And this tour in particular had the Road Warriors, Barbarian, Paul Orndorff, Earthquake, Typhoon, Tatanka, Greg Valentine, One Man Gang, Maestro, and Public Enemy. So a lot of these guys, you would share locker rooms, I guess probably all of them over the years. But as you mentioned, the tour goes horribly. It's canceled midway through, and it's a financial disaster. So I guess the question is, how did you first become introduced to him? You had heard that, hey, this thing died. It was terrible. But now somehow you guys are connected. How do you get hooked up with Andrew?
So, and again, trying to jog my memory on this, and all the dots started back to connect. So Russo had contacted JB, Jeremy Borash, about all this. That's sort of how the original connection. But I can remember hearing, how does Rodman fit in with this cast of characters? And I'll say it was heavily weighted ex-WWF stars, and WCW was the hot product, to my understanding, down there at that time. But I looked up McManus. I had some folks here locally that immediately said, yeah, he's really the real deal. And he's highly connected around the world. He's a broker, not just a promoter, but a concert broker. He's dialed into that industry in a big way, not just Australia, UK, Asia, just really around the world. He knows that scene. But Vince's story to me was, and I truly believe it, in every shape, form, or fashion, was he just doesn't know the wrestling industry like at all, and sort of figured that out on tour one. And then, are you interested? Was Jeremy's question to me, and I'm like, yeah. And me and Vince might have had a couple of conversations around that, but I just remember Vince either couldn't do it or didn't want to do it. I'm not exactly sure what the deal was, but Jeremy asked me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm up for it. And especially after I had done the quick due diligence to my music contacts, that yes, he's well-funded, and he's a big boy in the promoter world. And I knew that there was a enormous amount of talent out there.
Two things here. What was your relationship like here with Vince Russo? We'll call it 2001.
Good. I mean, look, every relationship has its ups and downs. So I don't want to say at this point we were real high or real low. I think it was just a good relationship. The quote unquote, the WCW situation was game, set, match. He was still intertwined in that Bash at the Beach situation. And so that was, I think, the extent of it.
And you mentioned a minute ago, you sort of vetted McManus with some of your music contacts. Tell me about what that means.
Just, hey, do you know a guy named Andrew McManus who's a music promoter? Give me a day and call me back. Okay, call you back. Yes, he's done this. And Doc McGee is Kiss's manager / everything. But there, a couple of different names in Nashville, all checked out. Like, he is a music promoter who is successful And you can be a regional promoter in music. It's even to this day, my next door neighbor is one of the head honchos in UTA, but the music industry can be broke down a couple of different ways. But as far as touring, there's bar shows, there's shed shows, amphitheaters, there's arena, there's all different forms. But, there are guys that promote globally, and Andrew was one of them. Like I said, he had contacts around the world. Oh, he had done shows around the world. I came to find out later on firsthand that he's dialed in just about everywhere that big shows were played.
So once you sort of vet him, you have a conversation with him. What's that sound like?
So Jeremy sort of nailed down on you up for it. I'm like, yeah, I kind of think from what I'm hearing, and I didn't talk to any of those guys. Matter of fact, when I heard that list, you just say back, I just don't, wow, that's a lot of talent.
Yeah.
That was a big roster, but I didn't have any conversations to my recollection with any of them. But knowing that it had fallen apart, I knew going in, Andrew, where we at? And he, Jeremy said, are you interested in talking? I said, sure. So we talked, and I said, yeah, let's go for it. And when Andrew had his first conversation I need somebody who not only as a talent, but that can put things together. And I said, I'm up for it. So,
what was JB's role going to be? I mean, I know he did a lot of things behind the scenes with WCW, but when he's talking to you about McManus, is he saying, well, here's what I'm going to be doing? Do you know that?
No, I kind of think it sort of came together that, so, we're talking 20 years ago. So JB would have been in his late 20s, maybe, and I'm early 30s. I mean, so young. And, Jeremy at that point, as talented as he is and was, he was coming from essentially WCW Live. And so his rapport with talent has always been great, but I think he was probably a given that I'll take the lead and we're going to do this together, but I don't want to call him my right-hand man, but in essence, that's what he became at that point, that, right. Okay, let's do this. Disco Inferno, Glenn, who I'd known since the Memphis days, he was going to be involved. And it was like, okay, how are we going to put this together? And, we'll get to that, but, Andrew is like, okay, I just had a horrible situation. What's your suggestions? And that's sort of how it started.
Talk to me about Terry Taylor, because there's a report here from the Observer. Andrew McManus, who promoted the Rodman Tour of Australia last year, is working on a deal with Vince Russo and Terry Taylor to promote a tour in October of Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, which would include a pay-per-view company or pay-per-view taping. Andrew McManus is not known in the wrestling business, but is more known for the music industry. He had tours with The Who, Huey Lewis and the News, Whitney Houston, etc. So Terry Taylor makes the report here, and Vince Russo, but you sort of thought Vince Russo was passing. Was he originally in and then eventually got cold feet, do you think?
My recollection is Vince either could not do it contractually or did not want to do it. It wasn't his. Vince doesn't like to fly. He doesn't like to travel. So I mean, it's not like my recollection is he don't want to fly to Australia, period. And was still getting paid. And maybe that wasn't his cup of tea. He has always said, I'm a TV writer. There was not a TV show by any stretch of the imagination.
So what's your thinking of Terry Taylor? Do you remember what Terry Taylor was supposed to be doing here in theory?
My recollection, Terry wasn't really ever in, I'll call it the Andrew McManus equation, not because Andrew brought him up or I didn't want to bring him up or JB brought him up or any of that. He just wasn't a part of the equation.
So, boy, I'm fascinated by what you said, the Andrew Jeff thing. Is that the way it was positioned? Hey, this guy knows how to promote this continent, this country, these regions. Yep. He's got ends, but he doesn't know the wrestling business. So it was positioned from the jump that you'll sort of be his wrestling person.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, without question. And again, he took a bath and a bad one. And so, as I'm sitting here saying, Terry was not an in-ring performer at this point either. So being able to wear multiple hats again, coming off the financial situation. Jeremy can promote, he can be a right-hand man, he can be a ring announcer, he can be a commentator, wear multiple hats, which you'll see will play out over the next month, is very valuable.
So around this time, just to add context, a lot of promotions are popping up. Main Event Championship Wrestling by John Collins of Evansville runs an ECW arena show that literally falls apart. I mean, unbelievable. Are you nervous that, man, all around me, guys are starting to try their own thing and it's not working out? Or did just the old nod from your music buddies make you feel confident that, hey, if I can keep the guys in line, so to speak, and I can handle that end, and I'm confident in my abilities to do that since I grew up in the business, we'll be fine?
Andrew laid out to me his, I'll call it sort of a short-term vision, because I asked him, like, okay, what is sort of the mindset? And he was like, look, Jeff, he said, this is an Australian tour and New Zealand. Okay. If we come back here in 6 months, it's not going to be old. It'll still be somewhat fresh. We've probably got 2 runs in the UK, twice a year. We probably have, we'll call it a European run, maybe twice a year. I remember him because my 94 run in Germany, me and Kevin Nash used to joke. We saw each other more on a bus than we did our families. Anybody? I mean, because we were over there 6 or 7 times in 1 year. For Vince. But anyway, so Andrew sort of laid out this quasi global touring schedule. And he had concert promoters in Kuala Lumpur. I mean, just really a global touring. And I'm like, do you believe? And he goes, we've got to sort of get our footing on this, but yes. And we can, he said, I don't really know the television industry, but I'm like, yeah, we can capture content without question. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we can for sure capture some content. And so that sort of jumping off point was, okay, here's Australia. And I think it was October. We're going to go to the UK in December. We're going to circle back. And he had some big plans. But he just sort of wanted to find his way through it all. But that was like, I never envisioned, okay, this is my 10-year plan. Look, I'm 30, early 30s. I didn't even think about a 5-year plan, but it was like, okay, let's see where this goes. Because he, not only his personal money, he also had, again, the broker, the connections around the world where it wasn't all his money either, which fascinated me that, okay, there's plenty of talent out there. These promoters, this is a American form of entertainment, so to speak. Let's see where this takes us.
So I guess we should address, sort of the way the business has changed. I mean, these days it's all about television rights, but back in the day, this was a very much a live event business. I mean, what you grew up in, and even the Vince McMahon model, maybe not so much WCW, especially towards the end, was, hey, let's give them, an infomercial for the live event on TV, but we're trying to sell tickets. And now we're just going to, I assume, run commercials inside of existing wrestling content. So as Monday Night Raw or whatever they called it over there airs, we're going to go ahead and slide a commercial in saying, hey, all these great stars are going to be here. Come on out and see us. Is that sort of the concept?
And not just, I don't want to say it wasn't predicated on advertising within WWE content. It was, look, we are going to get savvy with media, radio, and that kind of stuff, do the local breakfast show and the midday show and whatever it may be, but attack the media like he does his music acts. And, he said, you've got a lot of folks that quote unquote are household names. And he's like, you only need a few, was his mindset. He did tell me, look, I sort of learned from that, he had such a top loaded card, but anyway, he, wanted to promote it in essence, like he does his music tours, and until he got his footing, but he felt very confident in that, in the marketing and, we'll call it the normal, I don't even know if that's the appropriate word, but his concerts and acts that he would book, they didn't have, not all of them had quote unquote current radio play. It was come see so-and-so band come out and play their hits. Why is that mindset?
I know I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to understand. When a guy goes out and loses his ass and it's a disaster with Beefcake and Rodman, is his explanation to you, well, the reason it didn't work is because I just didn't know the space like you do. So I need you to come in. You know, I know how to promote. Don't judge me based on this most recent failure. I know what I'm doing. I just don't know the wrestling business like you do, and I need your help. Is that sort of the gist of the way he presented it to you? Because me looking from the outside in, I'm like, well, if this didn't work before, why would it work now? All these great marketing ideas he's got, they didn't work before.
I asked him how do you put butts in seats? How do you plan to do that? And he just said, look, it was a shotgun effect before. And he, I think sort of, and I wasn't there, but I heard from a infrastructure, the tour was a disaster of talent working together. It was very dysfunctional. He wasn't real happy with that. And I just said, you got to get lean and mean and figure out, because they did sell to what I recall was they sold some tickets. They didn't sell out, but they sold some tickets.
People were there. People showed up, but
yeah,
not to the level he had expected. And so, maybe that, here's the thing I'm sort of tiptoeing around, because gosh, I don't want to be negative, but well, listen, a lot of people throw this word around and they don't really understand it, but it is an industry term. Did you or Russo or anybody you talked to perceive Mr. McManus to be what's known as a money mark?
I certainly never did, just because of his
resume,
pedigree in the music industry. Did he know wrestling? Nah, not at all. I mean, he just didn't, but he had no problem admitting that. I mean, like from the very first conversation. Now, I didn't have any context of what were his conversations with Barber or Rodman or any of the other guys. I had no idea, but maybe he certainly learned his lesson. But no, he never had that quote unquote money mark vibe.
And let's just sidebar for a minute, because I feel like a lot of people use that word they don't understand. And I'm coming to defense of my old pal here, but the term money mark, the way I understand it, is someone who wants to run shows, even if they're at a loss, just because he likes being around the business. He's a big fan. And so some guys will go sit down at a blackjack table and, lose 10 grand, but hey, they had fun. So who cares? And other guys would run a live event, a pop-up show, a spot show, if you will, an outlaw show, and they might lose 10 grand, but who cares? They had fun. And sometimes people throw that around for Tony Khan. AEW is profitable. So by definition, that is not accurate. But I know that term gets thrown around a lot, but McManus, based on his pedigree, he's handled touring acts on a big basis. You don't just go, hey, we're going to handle this Whitney Houston tour or this Kiss tour unless you know what the hell you're doing. Right.
Yeah. And look, my grandmother didn't teach me, my father did. A money mark somebody who the bottom line isn't the priority.
Yeah.
There's a real dividing line there. Mm-hmm. If you truly want your number one priority to be in black ink as opposed to red, it sort of throws everything out the window. Andrew desperately wanted black ink, and that's how he had his mindset on, and we're talking the shows and the amount of money we were spending in wrestling, even that first tour compared to what he spent on stadium shows and big arena, it was peanuts. Like real peanuts for him.
So let's come to terms on your terms with McManus. When you're going to appear on the cards. Obviously you're going to put dudes in figure fours and hit them over the head with guitars and all that. But you're also going to be sort of his, for lack of a better word, his right-hand man in all this. You have to come up with some sort of way to compensate yourself for that. And this is really probably the first time that you've been in this spot. I mean, when you were negotiating with Ted Turner's organization or Vince McMahon's, you were talking about they're going to pay you as an on-screen performer to go make towns. Now you're getting into, I don't know, the quote unquote office money. What was that process of negotiations or discussions like with Andrew?
I made it real simple because, we were literally negotiating out of the gate the Australia and the UK tour. That's it.
Right.
Just look, and I just said, look, my day rate is this. God, I wish I'd love to dig those, but it was. I should have done that homework. But I had a day rate, and I said, let's just bump it up $100 or $200, not a lot across the tour, and that will get me, all the legwork leading up to the tour, contacting the talent. And Jeremy did a lot of that. Andrew was always the final guy to do the, well, quote unquote, final hire, do the money, do everything. We tabled talent, discussed it, tossed it Andrew's way. He tossed it back. At the end of the day, Andrew did all the quote unquote hiring and firing, but not really firing because he didn't have anything to do. But I just negotiated into my day rate a couple of bucks to get us to the tour, to do the legwork.
So it doesn't go swimmingly well. Here's the line from the Observer. Several of the names from the WWAS Tour of Australia that start this week were canceled at the last minute. Apparently, it was a cost-cutting measure as airline tickets were much higher than anticipated due to the original airline going out of business. Several wrestlers were pulled from the tour also because some sort of problems existed. Boy, that's about as vague of a report as we'll ever read in the Observer. But I guess you guys have airline tickets, figured in. Obviously, that's part of your overhead. And anytime there's international travel, that can get costly in a hurry. And now if the airline really did go out of business, which I guess makes sense, at the last minute, boy, that airline price really skyrockets because now it's a last minute fare versus, you booking it, 2 or 6 months ahead or whatever. Tell me about this airline snafu. And then can you sort of shed any light on some sort of problems existed? What does that mean?
What was kind of ironic, but not really ironic. Some of the names, and I can remember, and even Jeremy wasn't really in the know because Jeremy had I'm just throwing a approximate, maybe a month relationship between him and Andrew prior to him introducing to me. But Jeremy hadn't even heard of these names that quote unquote were canceled. And I'm like, wait, I didn't even know they were booked. They were never a part of me and Andrew's discussion, any of that. I do know that Andrew came to me. One of the first conversations, he said, Australian airfare is really expensive. And I said, yep, buy it now. I mean, let's get in. He goes, well, it's not so much that there's always a price war. And sometimes you got to buy them right. And buy all this travel stuff that I come to later be taught by Bob Ryder, like the real ins and outs of, it's one thing to Y fare and M fare and Q fare and back all that up, but buying them right, buying them in bulk, buying them direct, all the different, and nowadays, none of that mindset exists at all. But it was 20 years ago we're talking about on how to buy airline tickets. But I remember Jeremy saying, okay, this guy got cut and we didn't even know about it. But the thing that early in the relationship, I was very aware that, hey, JB, we're really not completely in lockstep, and rightly so. It's his business. We're not exactly sure of some of the conversations going on that we're just not in the know. And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to deal with this, but we can only submit him because Jeremy is the one who would type up the formats and the cards. And then we would try to get a budget and like, Andrew, does this suit you? Budget wise, because I was very bullish on run lean and mean. This is going to be a learning curve. Run lean and mean.
Were you also factoring in production costs, like was he handling all that?
No, he did. He was just talent and travel. And I wasn't booking the tickets. His guy, oh gosh, what was her name? He had a right-hand woman who did a little bit of everything. PR. Oh gosh, Jeremy would know her name. But anyway, all our job was really to quote unquote book the matches, and he wanted lots of action and lots of different things going on. But we didn't book travel. We would submit it to his team, and they'd come back and go, "Ooh, it's going to be expensive," or Andrew doesn't like this, or Andrew doesn't like that.
So they're handling hotels and they're handling airfare, and they're also
music tours. Yes, like he did music tours.
And they're handling, speakers and lighting rigs and all that stuff. But I assume there is going to be some stuff that you're going to need to be a part of. I mean, you said the word earlier, content. This was being filmed?
Not the first tour, but knowing that
was the plan.
Yes, we're headed in that direction.
So when some of the guys start coming off of the tour and you find out, oh, so-and-so's canceled, are they calling you like, what the shit did you get me into, Jeff?
No. The people that got canceled, I had no, that's what I'm saying is me and Jeremy weren't even aware of some of these guys who got canceled, because I can remember thinking, well, we didn't even know you were on there.
Right. I got you. So when you start to hear and read in the Observer that some of this stuff is happening, do you start to get worried, for lack of a better word, about your income?
Not my income. I really didn't. And the very least he could stiff me, I've never been stiffed on a payoff, quote unquote, like on a nightly deal. And I've worked for a lot of folks, but yeah. I didn't really give it a second thought. He had my plane ticket. The worst that can happen, he not pay. But no. And again, that goes back to like sort of step one. Hey guys in the music industry, what do y'all know about Andrew? Oh, he booked PSC, or you book A-listers like that. You just don't survive.
So when you hear of cancellations, even if they were guys you didn't know about, you just assume he made a business decision. It's what all businessmen do. See you on the tour.
The transition from tour 1 to tour 2 and getting to know Andrew a little more at the time, he's very artsy. And so, okay, that's how he operates. He's in and out, but no, I've moved on.
So this is your second tour of Australia. Of course, you toured with WCW the year before, as you mentioned. Did you have more fun with WCW or this one, personally?
I had fun on both. I love Australia. I've when people ask me if you didn't live in Hendersonville, or if you didn't live in the United States, or if you didn't live, where would you live? And I've always said Gold Coast, Australia. It's a beautiful country. It's a long way over there, and it's good and bad, but it's a beautiful country. I love Australia. So I had fun both times. I worked a lot every time I went there. Like, I'll say we did some sightseeing in a couple of times, Sydney Harbor, but that was in the TNA days when I got to go over for PR tours. And that would be built into, we're going to have lunch here in the harbor, or we're going to have dinner here, and you're going to meet with Foxtel at this place, or we're going to take you out to this place and do some photo shoots or whatever. But lots of work, but again, and lots of travel, but it's a big country. You don't realize how big it is. It's 5 or 6 hour, 7-hour flight from Perth to Sydney, and that's cross country. So it's United States size.
So let's talk about the first show. It is in Perth, Western Australia. It's October 19th, 2001. So we're 7 months after WCW goes down. Juventud Guerrera is going to defeat Psychosis. Conan is going to defeat the Vampire Warrior, who we know.
Pause you just for a second.
Yeah.
You realize Juventud came back to this country after the WCW episode.
I wasn't sure if you wanted to tell that story here or if you want to wait and talk about it.
I didn't. You just skimmed over. Juventud made his return to Australia. I'm just helping you out here, Connie.
No, I mean, listen, it's quite a story, and yeah, you would think they'd have his picture up at a lot of the hotels and things, but here he is. Either way, Juvi beats Psychosis, opening match. Probably good to get that one out of the way just in case. Conan defeats the Vampire Warrior, who we know as Gangrel. Buff Bagwell beats Disco Inferno. Danny Dominion teams with Nathan Jones. There's a name. To beat Lenny Lane and Lodi. Norman Smiley is going to beat Crowbar. Jerry Lawler beats Stevie Ray. And in the main event, Road Dogg beats Jeff Jarrett. Of course, Road Dogg is fresh off of his New Age Outlaws run. He's probably one of the bigger stars in the business at that point, right?
Huge. Him and Lawler, to me, were the headliners. This is in Perth.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a unique story as you were running that over, because the Perth was the first. When you said, let's talk about the first show. So I could remember flying in, and again, if the Indian Ocean butts up to Perth. So from Perth Airport And when you look on a globe to little old Nashville, Tennessee, but that's about as far away as you can possibly get.
Oh, yeah.
For landing and going through that day. But anyway, we get to the building. This is not a sidebar because it's something that I went, Andrew looks at the industry and looks at this touring model a little different. So he had proposed, and then it went from not just being proposed to mandated, is that he wanted Lawler to sit at ringside with Jeremy and color commentate live the entire event. Come on, interviewer, fire away at me.
Color commentate for what?
Did you know that fact?
Color commentate for what?
The people in the arena. Did you know this story?
No, there's commentary coming through the speakers.
Live commentary. And I'm, for ad-free folks, they'll be able to see the Conrad's reaction. That's the reaction I had. Like, what? Wait, you're going to have Jerry Lawler talking during a match, as good as the King is. And obviously grew up with Jerry. And I'm like, and Jeremy, and he goes, that's what Andrew wants. That's what Andrew wants. And I'm going.
So the commentary piped in through all the speakers through the arena. Yes.
And I said, well, Andrew ain't getting it. And Jeremy's looking at me like, oh boy, night one, here we go. So anyway, that discussion went on. And then I don't know all the ins and outs. And then, Jerry was up for it. And I go, okay, let's see how this goes down.
And
I can tell you, Conrad, and you will find this out. I've been wrong a hell of a lot more times. Didn't I text you that earlier today?
Yes.
I've been wrong a lot more than I've been right. But no, I was pleasantly surprised. Now, Jerry Lawler can wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And he is super, super, uber talented, super skilled, just all the above.
Yeah.
But him pulling off color commentary at ringside between rest holds, between high spots. Jerry is obviously his first and foremost thing was he was a wrestler.
Yeah.
So he knew when to talk and when not to talk and when to be the voice of the fans when the heel's outside and whatever it may be. And him and JB pulled this off. And when Andrew pulled me aside before the show, and I said, Andrew, I just, and I'm sure I probably said something to the effect with my ego. Hey, dude, you don't know what in the F you're doing, blah, 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 whatever it may be. And he goes, God, what was the nickname he had for me? Oh, it'll come to me. But anyway, he just said, Jeff, he said, I want these people to have the experience that they've had
on TV.
On TV. And I go, got it. I said, let's give it a shot. And Jerry did it. And Jeremy, I'm not downplaying Jeremy, but their cadence added to it, got the people up. But it was interesting. But that was a part of Andrew's, mindset of the presentation and the global touring. For for fans that would come that weren't completely ingrained, but also Jeremy and King can tell stories and navigate and give storylines and tell people
add context, fill in the blanks, all that.
Exactly.
It's interesting, this group of talent too. Nathan Jones. Now, of course, everybody listening to this knows Nathan Jones, but here's what you might not remember. You saw Nathan Jones in 2002. This is 2001. This is pre his WWF run. And Danny Dominion, by the way, I think we should mention, most people probably know of his work, even if they don't know of him, because of Ace Steel, who obviously had played a big hand in CM Punk and Colt Cabanas. And anyway, Nathan Jones, what'd you think meeting this guy for the first time?
So Andrew obviously hyped him up to me before we got there and talked about his size and everything. You just take one look at Andrew and you just go, wow. And then obviously me being the in-ring talent go, oh boy, somebody's got their work cut out. Let's keep it simple, accentuate the positive, add the negative. But what a physical specimen, and his face is money. He just is blessed, gifted. He's got an incredible look.
Any other memories from this first night that you want to share with us before we go to the next night?
No, just that commentary thing. Look, you said it earlier. Road Dogg Brian was he was, you know, his transition from New Age Outlaws to the Dog. You know, he was a singles guy in so many different ways. Yes, he made his name in DX, and you know, then he was, however you want to cachet it, but he was a single main eventer in so many ways.
I want to mention too, you're going to be in the main event the next night, but something interesting is taking part of that second night festivities. Bret Hart joins the tour. What do you remember about Bret being on the tour? I don't think a lot of people even remember that.
It was great. I remember he got to the building, I don't say late, but we were landing in, that was Adelaide, you said?
Yeah, 808 or however you say that.
City Churches. I think Ray Ripley's from there. But no, beautiful town, really pretty town. But we were traveling, we'll call it by bus, when we landed at the airport. So we got to the building early, or earlier than Bret. And I just remember seeing Bret in the back of the building. I hadn't seen him in
years.
Wow. Yeah, a while. And so it was great to catch up. And me and Bret back to, I mean, even Memphis, but you know, I worked a house show run with Bret early in my WWF career. And I think, I don't say I gained his respect that night, but you know, we hit it off in the ring, as well as, again, he's the son of a promoter. So me and Bret always were cool, and to see him and coming off his injury, but you know, with everything that he had gone through at WCW, it was great to see him and catch up. I was glad that Andrew had brought him in, and the Andrew Bret deal was one-on-one. Me, JB, Disco, we had not, you know, because Bret wasn't wrestling. We had no discussions. That wasn't our call at all. Happy for it, but you know, that was done between Andrew and Bret.
The card that night is Juventud Guerrera and Psychosis beating Lenny Lane and Lodi, Norman Smiley beating Crowbar, a dog collar match with Road Dogg and Conan. Timeout right there. How was Conan on this tour?
Great. You know, Conan, we met in 95. Gosh, that's amazing. That far back. But so not just good, great. I could, as you were reading off that card, another memory flashback, because I was always one that let's give them the same show every night. Let's put our best foot effort and not juggle it. Andrew wanted to go the other way, and I said, okay, we'll give you a different show every night, and that's what he wanted. Different stipulations, different mindsets, different guys working together. But you know, Perth to Adelaide is by plane 4 hours. Something like that. So no fans traveled back-to-back shows. And if they did, they wouldn't mind seeing the same show over and over. But it's a different show.
You've got a mixed tag in here this time with Adara James and Danny Dominion beating Gangrel and Luna Vachon. Nathan Jones picks up a win over Disco Inferno. And once again, you're in the main event. This time, Bret Hart's going to count the pin as Buff Bagwell beats you. Buff Bagwell has had a reputation at different times, depending on what circle you're talking about. What was your relationship like with Buff? How was he on this tour?
He was, I mean, look, Buff, he's a Georgia boy, but my style of, I was taught, I'll say this, I'm not proud of myself, but I have a match with anybody, and I knew Buff's signature moves, and look, I just knew how to work a Buff style match, and in we'll call it a one-off, like Adelaide and Perth, the whole tour was just go out and give them great entertainment. I was tickled to death that Bret was going to be involved in the finish, which, you know, candidly, when you're in a situation like this, that the biggest star on the show is not wrestling, but, you know, entertaining. So you build to the one spot, period. You build to Bret being involved.
2 nights later, you're in Canberra. Probably pronounced that wrong. The Australian Capital Territory. and that's Juventud over Psychosis, Conan over Gangrel, Dominion and Jones over Lane and Lodi, Bagwell over Disco, Norman Smiley over Crowbar, Jeff Jarrett over Stevie Ray, and then double duty. It's the WWA World Heavyweight title match. We're crowning our very first world champion. Road Dogg gets the win over Jeff Jarrett. That one happens on October 23rd. What's the thinking in let's make a champion on our third show?
Andrew wanted it. So that means, who did Road Dogg work with?
He didn't work prior to that. That was his first match that night. I mean, he had worked otherwise on the show or this tour. 2 nights prior, he was in a dog collar match with Conan, and then of course you guys main evented the.
Am I the only one that worked twice that night?
Yes, just you.
Okay. So I have no idea, other than Andrew probably wanted a champion crowned early, and also wanted everybody to perform. And maybe I said I'll work twice as opposed to making it a 3-way. I do not recall that, Conrad. I pride myself sometimes on having really good recall. I do not recall.
2 days later, you guys are in Wollongong.
Wollongong. Beautiful.
New South Wales, Australia. It's Juventud and Conan over Norman Smiley and Psychosis. Gangrel beating Luna Vachon. How about that for a match?
Husband, wife at the time.
Yeah, that probably happened in real life. Buff Bagwell. She probably went over, though.
Yes, for sure.
Buff Bagwell would beat Disco Inferno. Crowbar beat Danny Dominion. Nathan Jones beat Lenny Lane. That was probably fun. Jerry Lawler beat Stevie Ray. And then you're in the main event again in a losing effort against the champ Road Dogg. I want to mention so far we're 4 shows deep, but he's given you a night off in between. So you're working October 19th, and then October 21st, and then October 23rd, and then October 25th. Is that because the travel is so strenuous, or he was just, not Vince McMahon and believed in giving the guys a day off so they didn't have to just fly around and kill themselves every night?
Perth to Adelaide is a haul.
Yeah.
And yeah. So all of it is, I'm trying to think if we would have done a jump plane or bus. But Australia is a really big country. So I know travel is involved in that. I mean, sort of what you said, working us back to back to back. I don't say it's impossible in Australia, but I'm sure it's more expensive. But having a day off in between, gave everyone a rest. And again, it was a brand new team put together, brand new set of circumstances.
So their pay-per-view, the WWA pay-per-view, takes place in Sydney, and for some reason the title has vacated and now it's put up in a tournament. Your guess is as good as mine. It's an interesting night, to say the least. There's even a guitar on a pole match with you and Nathan Jones. And you're saying Vince Russo was not involved in this.
Correct.
Okay. Just busting balls. So here's the show that night at the Sydney Superdome. I guess before we run through the card, what do you remember about the pay-per-view? I mean, I know these days you're involved with Fight. You got your finger on the pulse of all things pay-per-view. What was your involvement with the pay-per-view in this era? And is this something that he just said, don't worry about it, Jeff, I got it?
So to start with your last statement, don't worry about it, I got it. I truly believed in that on production wise. That was his ball of wax. He's from Australia, got all the resources. We're going to get it done. We're in charge of talent, commentators, backstage. That was our role. But my old buddy Rove, who I'm still very good buddies with, for those who don't know who Rove is, he, I'll call him like a Jimmy Fallon. He had not a nightly, but once a week show on Channel 9. He's a comedian, a stand-up comedian, we'll say by trade, but now he's, executive producer. He's great on camera, off camera. He's a jack of all trades, master of a lot of them as well. But Rove, I love him for this. He is a true wrestling fan, and him and McManus, however they had the relationship, he wanted a guitar shot. So Conrad, me, how do we make a guitar shot happen? Let's put a guitar on a pole match. I don't recall that exact situation. But look, who is the most natural for Rove to be in the corner of?
Yes.
Australia's own Nathan Jones. On pay-per-view, it was a selling point. And, to go back on it, which is a big part, in this day and age, and this is something that, we'll call it all the wrestling journalists, the pay-per-view buy industry in 2001, coming off the Attitude Era, where both companies were doing a pay-per-view a month. Our good buddy at 83 Weeks transitioned in, what was that, 95? Because that spurred the In Your House, once a month. So a pay-per-view a month, lots and lots of pay-per-view buys. Vince was, again, ahead of his time and pioneered that from closed circuit to pay-per-view and just putting that content out. So wrestling was, from a mindset, was the pay-per-view industry. So Andrew, I know, wanted to, we'll call it cash in or make up, or, it was a part of his plan that we will do. I remember him saying, we're going to do quarterly pay-per-views, or he didn't really know the model, and I didn't either, what was going to work, but he wanted to do a pay-per-view, and he had high hopes, and we did as well, that, okay, we can run this tour, and if we're moderately successful, but do just okay in the pay-per-view world, okay, it's a sustainable model. And so that was the mindset of doing a pay-per-view. Still to this day, I'm not real sure why we went to the enormous arena. It's cavernous. It is a really big venue, but again, that's where he wanted to go. And not that was quote unquote the wrestling building, because there wasn't a wrestling building in Australia at that time, but it's where he wanted to go. So Rove and Nathan and the WWA, I mean, it was a big deal, and he did a massive amount of press, as I recall, for the show.
Yeah, the Sydney Superdome is where the show goes down. I mean, the capacity here is like 21,000. There's 8,500 fans here. So to say it was a disaster is not totally accurate. 8,500 is a big deal. I mean, just a few years ago, a whole promotion was launched on can we sell 10,000 tickets? So this is not that bad.
No.
And I do want to mention that Bret Hart is in the commissioner role here. I don't want everybody to think he's just randomly there. As you mentioned, Lawler and Borash are the commentators. The referee, they probably remember from WCW, Slick Johnson. What a great name that is. Let's talk about the matches, though. We've got a Cruiserweight Championship here. It's a ladder match, Juventud over Psychosis. So not only is Juvi back in Australia, he's the champ, baby. Yeah. First round of the tournament to crown a new champion, Road Dogg over Conan in 3 minutes and 42 seconds. They do a hardcore match with Smiley over Devin Storm. Shout out to Devin, who I know listens. And then there is a first round battle royal. And boy, this is hard to pin down, but everybody's in here and everybody agrees it was fun. There's even non-wrestlers, but Buff Bagwell's here, Disco Inferno, Norman Smiley, Crowbar, Stevie Ray, the commentators, both Lawler and Borash, Slick Johnson, a cameraman, another referee, a woman in a gold dress, security guards, and I think a couple of folks who they refer to as Banana in a Pajama 1 and 2. It's a silly battle royal, but fans seem to dig it, and it did take a lot of time, 6 minutes and 24 seconds. And then we get you and Nathan Jones in that guitar on a pole match. And then it's time for a semifinal 3-way for the World Heavyweight Championship. It's Road Dogg beating Lodi and Lenny. And then another lumberjack match. We can't just have a regular match here. So there's a lumberjack match with straps with Jeff Jarrett and Buff Bagwell. Of course, Jeff goes over. Hardcore rules. It's husband versus wife, Vampire Warrior versus Luna Vachon. This is all on pay-per-view, by the way. And a 4-way women's match where I think it's like a let's strip their clothes off match. And you've got Adara James beating Queen Bee and Sharon A and Violet, whoever these folks are. And then in the main event, it's a cage match. Yes, another gimmick match. Jeff Jarrett beats the Road Dogg, and by God, Jeff Jarrett is our WWA champion. What a show.
What a show. What a damn show. The battle royal. Let's go back to that. Because, a lot of times, why are you chuckling on that? Look, as you know, I was born and raised on Jerry, the King Lawler, and he can be, as a Monday Night Raw watcher is well aware of, great comedic timing.
Yes.
But he was a very serious wrestler. Jackie Fargo, the same, very serious. One of the best serious promos I ever, in my opinion, ranks right up here at the top. But he had a ton of comedy in him as well. So I think comedy in the right spots is completely underestimated in this day and age. It can be overdone though. But Pajama 1 and Pajama 2, I mean, were really big deals in Australia. It's like the Wiggles, but Pajama 1 and Pajama 2 were big deals. And so I got a sidebar here. Can I sidebar here for a minute?
Please do.
Because to this day, Glenn Gilbernetti, however Conan wants to pronounce his name, but to this day, Disco and me still say this line to each other to this day. So me, Jeremy, and Glenn take a trip to Memphis during the summer of No Worries to just get away and let's just freestyle, as Conrad likes to say, and just talk about all kinds of talent. At that time, I feel like, we would have, if we're talking about Banana 1 and Banana 2. So we'd sort of got marching orders from Andrew. We want gimmick matches and we want a lot of entertainment and we got to keep the budget low and the flight. So we more or less have maybe we went, I don't know, 2 weeks before the tour, whatever it may be. We had our marching orders. So let's put the shows together. So we're down there and Jeremy, to this day, I still laugh about it, but Jeremy and Disco, they got sidebarred and we're talking about this battle royal. And, you just said it, a cameraman and this guy, but it's the comedy relief. Self-deprecating. The whole show was comedy relief, but not really. But no. So as we're going through everything and telling the ins and the outs and, hey, Lawler, look, he can come up from the announce table and whatever it was, we're laying out this. And they keep saying, oh, no, we'll listen. No, forget the Pajama 1 or Banana 1 and Banana 2. Forget all that. So that goes on like 10 minutes. And finally, Conrad, I'm there and we're probably having a couple of, we were at Chili's in one of those high top tables.
You had a triple play and some beer.
So, but there was a moment when I said, come on, guys, please focus on the bananas. And they both looked over at me and said, can you repeat what you just said? And I said, and I was, the old Jeff, I was wound up. I said, and I was dead serious, guys, dadgummit, focus on the bananas. And then they chuckled again. And then I was like, okay, guys, we've got to lay this match out. Andrew wants the bananas. They're a really big deal. We got to make it make sense. How are we going to get them in? How are we going to get them out? But anyway, that's my sidebar. To this day, Disco will tell me, Jeff, focus on the bananas.
That's hilarious.
Oh, you had to be there, but we chuckled.
Your pay-per-view event, I mean, it's not the last night of the tour. You still got one more show. We're going to talk about it. But when it's all over, it's done. You're the champ. We're going off the air. You've wrestled. There's been this crazy battle royal. You've had a guitar on a pole match. You've had a lumberjack match with straps and now a cage match.
With
Are
blood.
you pleased? Is Andrew pleased?
Andrew's very pleased. He, as crazy as it may sound, he sort of saw, okay, I'm going to give these guys my wishes and wants and Bret and bananas and all this kind of stuff. But okay, I sort of see where this is going. We can entertain the people, the people that came to the shows. And like you said, 8,500, you look, we all know what that reality is. That's damn good. And we definitely the last days of WCW and the crowds they were put, and that's with $1 billion organization behind them. So 8,500 is a lot of tickets sold. Andrew's happy. Of course, we didn't know anything about buy rates or anything like that. But the people that were in the arena every night enjoyed it. That was something that, and I'll say this, JB and Disco and myself and the crew and the talent, and obviously Lawler every night would have his influence, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little. That's just how Jerry's always worked. But the shows were entertaining and the people felt like they got their money's worth, and Andrew was happy, for sure, very happy.
So we're not done, as we mentioned. There's one last night on this Inception tour. We're in Melbourne, Australia here. The main event is Jeff Jarrett beating the Road Dogg by DQ. Jerry Lawler beat Stevie Ray. Nathan Jones and Norman Smiley beat Lenny and Lodi. Buff beats Disco. Conan beats Gangrel. There's a tables match where Crowbar beats Danny Dominion, and Juventud defeats Psychosis to retain his Cruiserweight Championship. So when this thing's all done, and everybody was skeptical and thought, boy, this will never happen again, and WCW is the end of an era, here is a lot of, some local, maybe could be big stars like Nathan Jones, but a lot of former WCW talent and a couple of former WWF talent like Gangrel and Jerry Lawler. And now it feels like, hey, we might have something, at least from the outside. What were you thinking when the tour is over and you're headed back to Nashville?
I was really interested, and this is probably my promoter mentality. Okay, we did it in Australia. How's he really going to do in the UK? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Like, how's this really going to go down? Australia's in his backyard, and in the amount of contacts and just talking from people, whether it was at the gym or the PR places, he had, I mean, it literally is his backyard. Melbourne, Crown Plaza, Crown Center. It's a casino. It's you ought to go there. Conrad, we need to go do a stage show there. I'm telling you, you would love it. But anyhow, that's for another day. But, I was very optimistic is one word, but also like, okay, I see Andrew's vision. I really do, but let's get to the UK and see how that goes.
Are the guys coming to you and saying, hey man, we got to get so-and-so figured in, or, hey, can I get more the next time? Or, hey, when's the next one? I mean, they think that you're quote unquote office a little bit, right?
Sure. But they also knew by Andrew's one-on-one conversations, he was the money guy.
Yeah.
Like every natural dressing room is, hey, is this guy going to pay us? What's the real deal? That kind of stuff. I'm like, look, your guess is as good as mine. This is my first tour with him as well. It was well known within the locker room or whatever that Andrew was a music promoter and dabbling in this world. And I, for one, and I think it pretty much permeated, we were grateful and pretty excited. Okay, this guy, he's going to dig in. Let's see where it goes.
Overall, you said the first tour that was canceled with Barber and Rodman was just unorganized. Was this tour better? I mean, I know you weren't on
that, and I don't even know who the point man was on that. I wish I could recall who was the point man, but Andrew had we'll call it a tour manager that did music, that did hotel rooms and this and that. And we had some, I'll say, a few hiccups on catering and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it was, planes and buses and travel and gyms and directions on, the little things that touring artists need. Everything was there. But Andrew had dealt with, you name it. Bon Jovi, he'd Kiss. He had dealt with all kinds of rock stars and music stars and all that. So we are less maintenance in so many ways. I'm well aware of that. And so, it was, okay, on to the next tour. Let's see how it goes.
Well, and the next tour happened the very next month. You guys are going to be in Dublin, Ireland on November 28th. Once
right
again, right after Thanksgiving. The main event is you over Road Dogg on night one in Dublin.
Good house. We later ran that with TNA, but that little arena.
Actually, I think I have that maybe backwards.
Belfast and Dublin were two shows in Ireland that I'm like, okay, he's already diving into, Ireland. And we, as we'll get into this, he didn't just pick a few shows. It's Newcastle and Glasgow and Dublin and Belfast and London and Manchester and Birmingham. Sorry to get ahead, but it was here we go, 10-day tour.
Yeah. So, you do 2 nights here. I said the first night was Dublin. Actually, the first night's Belfast. Either way, yeah, you beat Road Dogg in the main event in both markets. And then you jump over to Birmingham. And again, it's a main event with you involved, but this time it's a little different. The first 2 nights were the same old crew. But here we've got Jeff Jarrett defeating Scott Steiner and the Road Dogg. It's a 3-way dance, and your old pal Scott Steiner is involved. How does Scott get tagged in here? I know you and he've been friends for years.
I think it was a deal about running lean and mean. So we probably did 2 Ireland dates, and his guarantee, and I would say his, not Scott's, my bad, Andrew McManus, his brokered deal that when he went to the UK, he brokered with other promoters over there. And so smaller venues, I don't know the exact numbers, but smaller. So it was a smaller crew on the first 2 days. And if I remember correctly, we had like 3 days off over there. And you
had 4 actually.
Okay. That's a pretty healthy stay. And so we brought in talent, to kick off the full tour, so to speak. But I can remember a couple of hotel room meetings, and it was okay. Now we're getting into the meat of this, and Andrew was having meetings, and it was one of those things. How are we going to make this thing profitable and enjoyable, and where we can come back? I would say the optimism. I don't have it completely locked down, but it was riding high.
Did WWA help get Jerry Lawler his job back, do you think? Because he's not with you in November. So, that first original tour that you guys were doing, as we mentioned, he's doing commentary. But come November 19th, after a 9-month hiatus, he's back on Raw, back where he belongs. Do you think that him doing something somewhere else and there potentially being a new player entering the game sort of fast-tracked his return?
No, you wouldn't be asking me that if you didn't believe it. Without question. Sure. It's just how the business goes.
Does he sort of put in a good work for his son? Because now that we're here in Birmingham and all this, Brian Christopher is going to join the tour.
And boy, that's a memory jogger, because Scott, obviously the WCW, on how that went down, I believe, and look, me and Scott go back to 86, 87. When he came essentially straight out of college/wrestling school. So we were best friends from 87. I believe these were his first shows since shut down. I think his contract expired somewhere around this time as well. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah. So Brian Lawler / Brian Christopher, him joining the tour. Look, I've always been a huge fan, always was, of his in-ring work. I can't recall. I kind of don't believe Jerry. I'm sure maybe in passing, but I would, again, I don't specifically recall. But if Brian was available and how he came available, I don't recall. But certainly, him being added to the roster would be a huge bonus. Through my eyes.
Let's keep it going here. We do know for sure you guys are going to hit London. You're going to hit Manchester. You're going to be teaming with Brian Christopher, or taking on Brian Christopher, who teams with Road Dogg. So your partner, Scott Steiner, you guys are the bad guys. Everybody wants to cheer Brian Christopher and Road Dogg, and Christopher and Road Dogg get their hands raised. So you're in the main event, no matter where we put you and who you're against. You wind up in Cardiff in Wales, and it's a world title match there in the main event. Again, a triple threat. You're victorious. We're also going to do Newcastle. Jeff Jarrett is going to defeat Scott Steiner in the main event there again. We're back in Glasgow. Jeff Jarrett's going to defeat Scott Steiner there. So you're in the main events all over, and we wrap up this tour December 11th. Of 2001. So 2 weeks prior to Christmas, but quite a tour, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shows. That's pretty strong.
And with 4 days off. I just remember, it was a run. And I was just sitting there thinking, as you were going through that Andrew was wanting to figure out by the end of this, who is the crew going to be?
Right.
Because he was wanting to wrap his head around, again, not just him, we all had big plans like, okay, so what was the next year? How was 2002 really going to look? What was really going to shape? how was this going to be done? Travel and storylines, which was, I'll say quasi storylines. But yeah, it was a haul. I can remember, I think I had to stay, I had to stay over after that last show. I had to stay the following day for meetings, which kept me over there essentially like 2 days more. And I can remember board that plane. I was ready to come home for sure.
Well, we're not done because we know that, we've still got another pay-per-view that we want to put together here. By the way, I guess we should mention the name. We keep saying WWA. It's World Wrestling All-Stars. That's sort of what they're going for here with the branding. But while that may be the end.
I like that. If just because I can remember one of the first conversations that specifically Andrew, like, hey, Double J, he did call me that. Yeah. What do you think about the name? And I said, I love it. He goes, that we want to, because superstars and all-stars. That's where I was going with that whole conversation. That he was dialed into that. He might have even trademarked that WWE All Stars or something along that lines. But that's the vision. It's the Harlem Globetrotters, if you will, a touring group of wrestling all stars. That was his vision.
So that's the end of 2001 for World Wrestling All Stars. But here's the thing. We've done our thing abroad. We did it in Australia. We did it in the UK. Now it's time to bring it to America. And just like Herb Abrams before him, we're going to run Las Vegas. When he tells you, hey, we want to run an American pay-per-view and we want to run it in Las Vegas, me and Las Vegas is not historically a strong wrestling market. Even WWE struggles there.
It's never, even back to the AWA Showboat days with Vern Gagne, that's the first place I met Kurt Hennig and the Nasty Boys. They did it at a casino, and I can remember, sorry to sidebar, but I can remember coming from Memphis and Louisville and Evansville and, that weekly vibe and that whole mindset and going to the Showboat at AWA, and they do these, I called them a game, a mass TV taping. Go out. Oh, Jeff, you're going to wrestle 3 times tonight or 2 times, whatever that was. And I'm just thinking about, man, these people, it's the first time, again, you take me back to my first days of Vegas. It always rings in my brain. Wow, a casino crowd. They're not into it. They're not
into it. So when he tells you, I want to run Las Vegas, do you not say, hey, Andrew, maybe not the best town. I get what you're going for, but what about Chicago?
Well, I said with the wrestling promoter cap, can you tell me why?
Yeah.
Andrew, can you tell me why? Well, I've got great connections and I'm going to get a building deal and I'm going to get this and I'm all this. I'm like, okay, look, it's he's steering the ship in so many different ways and he's super excited and okay, we're having a pay-per-view. We'll make it work. We know each other pretty well, Conrad, and we like to give each other a lot of credit.
Oh, I know what "we'll make it work" means. I already know. I already got that in Jeff speak. I know what that means.
Yeah, we'll get it done.
We're going to shine this turd up as best we can. It's going to suck, but this is what you want to do, so we'll make it work.
There you go. Well,
and here's the thing too. I don't think people think about this all the time, but when you run a pay-per-view in Las Vegas, you're basically running it in the afternoon. It's not your evening. I mean, when you get done, now you can go to dinner and now you can go to the bars and the clubs. It's not like, oh, what a night. I got to go home and go to bed. No, now it's time for supper. I mean, the time change is real, right?
Shift change.
Yeah.
When you really dial into it, the people who want to come see it, they're either still at work or got to get ready to go to work or I don't know. It's Friday night. I'm in the service industry. I'm going to make some serious bank on Friday and Saturday night. I'm not taking off. It just doesn't work. People who fly to Las Vegas and fly in and out, what do? Okay, I'm going to a show Friday night, dinner here. I'm going to this show Friday night. So it doesn't work for so many reasons, even if it was at 8 o'clock showtime.
Yeah.
Bad boy to 4 or 5. I mean, you literally got 3 strikes before you get up to see that 98-mile-an-hour fastball. You just do.
Is there a moment during the first leg of this tour and when you go back a month later in November and carry it through December, or when he tells you, hey, we're doing this pay-per-view in Vegas, do you remember there being a moment where you're like, yeah, this ain't going to work?
Do you know how many local promoters that I've dealt with in my first 7 years? And I'm talking about my grandfather, or my Eddie Marlin, or my grandmother on the other side, or my dad, or Buddy Wayne, or different promoters that would partner up with a local Kiwanis club or a quarterback club or National Guard Armory, all the folks that are quote unquote the local promoters that are kind of good show one, but show two, we turned this bad boy. They sold it out. So lots of learning play, and I'm talking on a very small scale, but to go from 700 people in a high school gym in Kentucky to those big high school gyms up there to 2,100 people, and the whole population is 15,000 people in the county, just small. Those kind of promoters that really know nothing, but you sort of got them, and then all of a sudden, wow, they know what they're doing. So this kind of analogy I've somewhat always carried with it. There were several moments in the Australia tour and in the UK tour that I didn't say, this ain't going to work. It was, we got us a learning curve here. That kind of stuff that, nope, this isn't the music industry. This is professional wrestling. And okay, now we're getting back to America. Oh, Vegas, that's going to be a uphill climb, but we'll make it work. Okay. And then the aha moment, which I wasn't aware of, and I may be jumping ahead here, Conrad, when I walked into the Aladdin and saw that it's theater seating, I literally was like, oh boy, oh boy, this vibe is not going to be easy. They just don't work. It's very hard in those kind of, people. It's a disconnect.
Let's keep going and talk about this story, and then let's start to wind things down, because we realize this is not going to make it. But I guess the question I have through all of this, Jeremy Borash is sort of your writing partner. What's Bob Ryder doing? Do you know?
So me and Bob, again, that we'll call it that WCW crew of Jeremy Borash and Bob Ryder, but Conan, again, his podcast partner, Disco Inferno, and myself, we were regular WCW live folks. And so I stayed in contact with Bob. We all did. Hey, what's going on? But Bob had really dove into what he was like. Mortgage is your bread and butter. Travel agency is his bread and butter. One time he had 7 or 8 folks working for him. He was in the travel industry before, during, and after. He never got out of the travel industry. But so he was doing his travel thing. And at that point, coming off WCW, he had his travel industry money, which was a lot. He had his WCW, and Bob was single. So he bought him a really nice fishing boat. I mean, a chartered deep sea fishing rig, beautiful rig. So he was fishing on weekends and running his travel agency and running OneWrestling.com. And at that time, and you may be able to give better context, but OneWrestling.com, now known as PW Insider, but OneWrestling.com,
big site.
It was up there maybe as far as sites, because I don't think Dave and Wade.
No, that was pre-Dave. It was the go-to wrestling site.
Okay, I was thinking that, yeah. So he was running a wrestling website, making money, fishing boat, making money. He's making money off his boat because he chartered it, and WCW money coming off of in his travel agency.
So here we are now. He's going to run an American pay-per-view. We talked about what he could do abroad, but did you think a pay-per-view without TV could work for McManus here?
Well, we had done the Sydney one, and it didn't set the world on fire, but it was what it was, but it was off hours. Now we were going to be quote unquote in prime time, live. I didn't really know how robust it was going to be, but again, Andrew had told me, I run Lane and Mean with production. I have this deal. And that's, if there was some sort of cracks in the armor, we were never really privy to production numbers, really even travel numbers, other than lower it. No, we can't do this. We got to cut this guy. You want to cut, that we weren't really privy to his books.
I want to mention that they're going to air that Sydney pay-per-view here in America on January 6th. And that's the one where you're going to win the world title. So, even though it already aired, in another part of the world. Now you're going to be able to see the pay-per-view here in America. And your dad wrote in his book that it was around this time that McManus stopped returning your calls. Do you remember that?
I don't remember him not returning my calls. I remember the Savage equation. Andrew desperately wanted McManus to be a World Wrestling All-Star. I'll say this, and running the ship. And I never had any optimism that would ever happen. I just didn't see Randy doing it at that stage of his career, coming off his WWF and then WCW run in the Slim Jim, and Randy's great with his money. And, I just didn't see that happening. And I told Andrew that, and he didn't like when I told him that.
It's reported at the time that Randy Savage was even going to replace Jeremy Borash as the booker. For lack of a better word, people were saying that Jeremy was the booker, and you sort of said, well, he did the format, so I could see how you would get to that. But I know that you had some creative input on all that. But the reports in the quote unquote dirt sheets were that Randy Savage was going to be the booker. Do you think that's just a carrot that maybe Andrew dangled? Sort of, hey, what's better than creative control? You can run the whole show if you'll just come over, Randy. Do you think that was a negotiating thing?
That was my understanding, that he was basically giving Randy the keys to the car. He really wanted Randy. He really wanted Randy in so many different ways. I didn't think it was going to happen. I just didn't. My dad's influence was, son, which way is this thing headed? And I'm like, until I'm told different, but maybe not. Might not should have voiced my opinion so loudly to him about Savage, but I was very bullish. I'll go back to Andrew, get your crew, get your all-stars, and put it together. And I'm not saying the complete card from up to down, but you need to get a crew where people can invest in you, but that won't be possible unless you invested them first. People are not going to clear their calendars and just say, hey, yeah, Andrew, you've got me when you want me. That just wasn't going to happen. And I said, as we get into this new year, those were some of the conversations I began to have with him on year 2. Look, if this is going, people got to clear their calendars. So, I'm not saying you got to pay him up front. I'm highly advising you not to do that. Look at the WCW situation, but you got to invest in them and invest in your crew.
I want to sort of elaborate on what you said there, that you were so, vocal about Savage. Savage is actually one of your favorite wrestlers growing up. You just felt like it was a time waster, right?
I just never saw Randy committing. I know he doesn't, Randy didn't like to book. He didn't like creative. He liked Randy's creative, and rightly so. It goes without saying. When Randy got out of the Poffo promotion business, he got into the Macho Man Randy Savage business, and he didn't even like commentating. That didn't work out with him and Vince in the early days, when he transitioned over to the announce position. Randy wanted to be a talent, and I just never saw him wearing multiple hats. And that was my conversation that I had multiple times with Andrew.
Let's talk about January 6th. I bring that up for 2 reasons. One, that's when the American version of the pay-per-view airs and you become champion. And your dad would also write in his book that this is the first time he remembers you discussing doing your own promotion. Do you remember that conversation with your dad?
I remember multiple brief conversations that I was telling him, in our home territory. So I'll try to give you a little analogy. So the Nashville TV would go out maybe 60 miles. I'm just hypothetically saying this, but 60-mile radius around Nashville. And Memphis was a much stronger, so maybe 90 miles. Louisville, 70 miles. But anyway, but we would run shows, we'll say Glasgow, Kentucky, or even Bowling Green, Kentucky, but different towns that, quote unquote, oh, they don't get regular TV. Oh, you have to pick it up on this station. Oh, you don't. So people that didn't get regular TV, if that makes sense, Conrad, am I explaining that right? Is what I'm saying. So I told him, I said, Dad, there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of spot shows to run. It's just not in our backyard. It's all over the world. There is an opportunity. Run right, get the right crew together, and get the right, and I'm saying from McManus's lead, get the right promoters together and create that, basically that touring all-star, and get into the mindset of how are we going to start creating content and getting the episodic nature. But coming off the Attitude Era, and I didn't put it in these words, but the business was so red hot that people knew Conan and Disco and Jeff and Steiner. I mean, there was so much talent on the market. I mean, Scott Hall, I mean, you could go on. There was a lot of talent out there. So that was my mindset talking to the dad. Yeah, there's a lot of spot shows to run around the world. You just can't oversaturate it. You can't go back to the same market. Go in with a fresh look. And look, just run lean and mean, and there's an opportunity here.
Tell us about the boat trip. That's sort of debunking the narrative, but for years and years, it was out there that Bob Ryder invited all you guys down for the big fishing trip. You just said he had a really nice boat there, and you supposedly got seasick and were miserable. But the genesis of the conversation is, why don't we start our own and run weekly pay-per-views? I know this is probably a story for another show, but chat me up. Did that conversation happen for the very first time on Bob Ryder's boat?
So this is, I'll give you context. Context is king. So I got a concussion and I grew up fishing, deep sea fishing with my dad and all that. But Bob Ryder invited me after I got the concussion. When Snuka drove off the cage at me in Buffalo, I don't know if you remember, I wrestled Snuka, Tito. Anyway, I had a severe concussion. I couldn't see light, not just daylight, house light, anything for about 3 days. I came home did Buffalo, then I got to Erie the next day, and they sent me home. So anyway, from that point forward, I'd gone, I'm trying to think, but anyway, Bob said, hey, let's go deep sea fishing. It was Ron Harris, Slick Johnson. There was a couple of us that went, and Bob, catching fish. And so, Conrad, when I tell you, we got on, here we go, got the cooler packed down full of food, those days full of beer. We're going out. Us boys are going to have a great time deep sea fishing. Conrad, I threw up for about 12 hours.
Yeah.
To the point, I mean, it was just brutal. Okay. Come off the summer of no worries. Now the next year comes around. Hey man, let's go fishing again. Why don't you do this, that, coming off the WWA. So anyway, hey, can I take my dad or can I invite my dad, Bob? Oh, I'd love that. Anyway, because they had already had a relationship. I didn't introduce them, but they had a relationship as well. So, okay. So it's me and my dad. We fly down to New Orleans. I get the rental car. We drive down to Venice, Louisiana is where Bob kept his boat. We get there. Anyhow, get up the next morning, load it all up, and here we go again. And you pull out through the channel and go down Mississippi, and then boom, head out to sea. We got out there. Oh, let me back up. I got sick. Yeah, so that would have been. Let me back up. That's why I'm telling the story. Rented the car, flew there that night. I've got the mindset, I'm going to have maybe one beer and go to bed. I want to be fresh as a daisy in the morning. I don't want to have, I want to fish. I want to give this a real shot. So Bob and my dad stayed up talking, and they chatted it up and had their discussion about the weekly pay-per-view concept. So next morning,
Bob's idea or your dad's idea?
I kind of think Bob, I obviously I went there, but I think Bob tabled it. Knowing both of them, Bob threw that out there. I would.
At this point, too,
Bob says
your dad had never run a pay-per-view show ever, right?
Super Clash. I'm just trying to think. Super Clash. I don't know if you're asking me or telling me.
No, I'm saying. I mean, he had joint ventures with Vern and stuff like that. He was a part of Vince. But as far as I'm gonna go line up my own pay-per-view show.
No,
that was probably still, and I'm not saying that in a way where I'm saying, oh, your dad wasn't qualified.
No. Yeah, I know what
I'm saying. It was probably hey, this is a box I haven't checked yet. I haven't done pay-per-view.
Outside of Super Clash, correct.
But it's Super Clash, again, not trying to pile on, not successful, didn't do well.
No.
In this era of wrestling. So your dad, I just want to add context, and we're going to talk about Memphis a lot later. But your dad had dominated territorial wrestling. I mean, he figured out how to make money in a socioeconomically depressed area, was one of the first millionaires in wrestling, probably. So he did really, really well, mastered the art, but he did it without pay-per-view. And now you hear about guys becoming not millionaires, but billionaires through pay-per-view. Yes. And so it's like, okay, this is sort of uncharted territory, and I've done so well and everything else associated with this. Why wouldn't I try it? He probably was itching to just venture into the pay-per-view world because these are found dollars that he's never participated in, right?
Yeah. I mean, the pay-per-view concept as far as him taking the lead as promoter, no, he'd never done that.
Yeah. So anyway, you think it was Bob Ryder's idea. They stay up all night. The next morning, you're up fresh as a daisy. They're probably a little sleepy. And now you're out here.
My dad loves fishing. To this day, he loves it. He just got back from Lake Eufaula. But anyway, no, they're all, and Bob too. Bob didn't get seasick, and my dad, for whatever freakish, doesn't have an inner ear or whatever it may be, he never gets seasick. And up until my concussion, I never got seasick. But, and at this time, to further, I had no idea that's what it drilled down to. I just know that when I went the year prior on Bob's boat, it was super rough seas, and I sort of discounted it. Oh, I might have been hungover or whatever, the rough seas. And I didn't really connect the dots. It took me a long time to connect the dots. But anyhow, so wake up, and on the way out, they talk about this. Hey, this is what we talked about, and this and that. I'm like, And then they start asking me about WWA, and we have that conversation. Then we get out there, and I get really sick. I mean, again, both eyes look like I'd been in a Mike Tyson knockout. I mean, both eyes, not just bloodshot, swollen shut. I threw up so many times on the boat. And it's the craziest thing. We head back home, and here we go. And we had like I want to say an 8 or 9 o'clock flight, but a late flight. And I'm thinking, laying down on that bed, just get me a hotel room. Just get me to a hotel room. I'm so sick. And when we docked and pulled up, and Conrad, you ever been seasick?
Oh yeah, twice. It's bad.
Okay. But it's really bizarre for folks who haven't been seasick. So I felt deathly ill, and we're banging on the waves. I mean, the boat's hitting those waves, and we're running over guys' wakes, just coming back in because all the boats come back in relatively same time. I cannot wait to get back in. We putt in because the no wake zones, and you pull there. And I just sort of start, but I'm still so sick. And now I'm feeling my eyes and nothing on my stomach. And, oh, man, just close to just felt like death. And as we tie up, you sort of threw my feet on the ground in the downstairs because I'd gone under on a bed and just tried to hang on. When I put my feet on the ground and the boat's just barely rocking, just really, and I'm like, oh, boy. And I come upstairs and they just both look at me like, oh, my God, this guy's been in a car wreck. But I mean, then of course my dad gives me the good nature. Oh, we had a blast. Come here and look at this fish. And I'm like, get away from me. They caught fish. They caught fish all day. And I stayed sick all day. And when you put your foot on solid ground, it's like the light switch goes off.
Yeah. All better.
It's just weird how that happens, but the equilibrium and all that. So up there, and then they start cleaning the fish, and I'm ready to go home. And then the conversation, somewhat, Bob's talking to me and my dad's talking to me. And, they were talking about, hey, starting a new promotion, this and that. And I told them the night before that, again, I'm going back to my little conversation I had with my dad. There's something to starting a promotion.
Yeah.
A, there's so much talent. B, it's not a territory. It's not even the United States. There's really a global opportunity here, because wrestling translates globally.
Is it fair to say that without these tours with McManus that you might not have been so bullish on the idea? I mean, I know that we're about to talk about a pay-per-view that wasn't hugely successful, because we are going to touch on that Vegas show, but man, it is interesting to look back in hindsight and think, what if, right?
As I sit here today in 2021 and you look back, And I truly realize the grand weaver is always weaving a mosaic. We only see it one block at a time. But it's when I think about the summer of no worries and the rest and the rejuvenation and sort of a reset on my life at that point, wife and 2 kids, quote unquote, bought my dream home. Just, what's going to make Jeff Jarrett tick and go around? Where am I headed with my life? Do I want to get in the construction business? No. Do I want to put in road, water, and sewer? No. I mean, I knew those answers. Like, where am I going to head? And when I think back during that time, and then Andrew calling and Vince Russo turning it down for whatever reason, and Jeremy and me having our friendship, and just how all the pieces of the puzzle and the mosaic continue to be put together in my life, I think you were going. If Andrew McManus hadn't have invested those 4 or 5 tours, I don't believe my career would have headed in the direction that it took by any stretch of the imagination.
So let's talk about the actual show here, because we've sort of teased that we've got this big Vegas pay-per-view coming up. It does happen, the Aladdin Casino in Las Vegas, and well, it doesn't go awesome. Meltzer would write, which leads us to the aftermath of the WWA fiasco. Besides the quality of the non-wrestling aspects of the show, Andrew McManus came under tons of heat for a show that in various places advertised names like Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Road Dogg, Buff Bagwell, and Randy Savage. And then came the stories of guys not being paid. Terry Taylor and Larry Zbyszko weren't paid. The reason given was that since they were late additions to the show, the checks weren't ready. Each was $1,000. Although that explanation sounded dubious, since Mark Madden was promised $1,000 and had a $300 check written out, but was able to get it changed. They were told their checks would be mailed. Others, like Lenny and Lodi, were real hot at the show. What do you remember about this falling apart financially, false advertising guys? And there's even a rumor that Rey Mysterio was supposed to debut at this show, but doesn't.
This is the proverbial, I'm the delusional optimist, and we're going to make it work. And the Australian run and the UK run and the vision and the ongoing conversations that there was a time change, obviously, in that December timeframe where Andrew was at home. But anyway, up until this night, I had extreme optimism that there was a future. And I'm not saying it was, we're going to be, Vince competition, not in those words, but that it was going to be up and blowing and going. But what happened that night, from the theater seating, the Aladdin, the infrastructure, the ins and outs of, what are you talking about, Randy? I told you Randy Savage is not what, Hall, Nash? Wait, what are you talking about? And the Ray talk, I've thought about that through the years too, that obviously I was a huge Ray fan, and I specifically remember having a conversation with Manus, and I said, if you can get Ray, I'm telling you, he's a game changer. I'd worked with Ray in WCW. Just a unique talent, because he is an attraction. Yes, his in-ring work goes without saying. In those days, cruiserweight. Nowadays, you can call it X Division or whatever it is, his high-flying style. But Ray as an attraction has always been so unique. Anyway, I was I could not wait if we'd get the chance. And then that never panned out. But coming in and all those different names, and I'm just thinking to myself, oh my God, who am I working with? How's this going to go down? And then I didn't know about the day of. I found out obviously after it, and hearing that recap, I just lived some bad memories, but I wasn't aware of it day of, about paychecks. And again, Andrew was the money guy always. I didn't have certainly any of that authority to even discuss it, but also didn't want it, because look, I've son of a promoter and grandson of a promoter. I know all the good, the bad, the ugly that come with that, but I had no idea. But the infrastructure of running a pay-per-view in that scenario, and we're on that stage in the go position, it was a mess, Conrad. I mean, it was such a mess.
Let's talk about the actual main event. But before we do, here's a little context from the Observer. The main event of Jeff Jarrett versus Brian Christopher wasn't finalized until a few hours before match time. The promotion wanted to do Jarrett versus Steiner, but neither was willing to do the job for the other. Jarrett did the show, but has been mad at McManus since McManus told Jarrett he was his right-hand man, but then after recruiting Savage, no longer catered to Jarrett. When Savage screwed him, he tried to go back with Jarrett, but Jarrett was still upset about how things went down, and there was even some question until about a week before the show as to whether or not Jeff would appear. Christopher had gotten a legal letter from the WWF, and who didn't see that coming, threatening the promotion if they billed him as Grandmaster Sexay. Lot to unpack here. I don't question the cease and desist that Christopher got. Is this true? You refused to do a job for your old pal Scott Steiner.
So yes, that is, and he was definitely refusing to do one to me. There was a definite stalemate because I'm going back to Andrew. We went through this Savage deal, and look, I'll give you a bogey, a mulligan on that. I kind of told you that wasn't going to pan out, but whatever. But going through this, I'm telling you, get you a crew and stick with it. And if you honestly believe Steiner is going to be with you, great. I don't buy it. And so at this point, Andrew, we've really got some decisions to make. Am I on the team or off the team? And that was a very succinct conversation. Oh, we'll worry about it after Vegas. Well, Andrew, that isn't really how this industry works. You want to worry about it after Vegas. And I get that as a promoter. He had so many headaches. He had so many balls in the air. It became overwhelming. He got in over his head from a political point of view. He learned his quick lesson with Savage. He learned his quick lessons with other talent. I think he really thought more than anybody he was going to have Mysterio. Again, he was on the job training, if you will, dealing with talent. And we were coming to this fork in the road. And Andrew, I've sort of told you this from day one. Get your touring all-stars together and go with them. That's the only one. Because winners and losers, again, growing up in the promotion, you show up to work, half your locker room is not happy, in essence. Hey, look, it's evolved over time. Certainly, certainly evolved over the 35 years. But in essence, a half of your locker room doesn't get their hand raised and would probably prefer to get their hand raised. Not that they're not going to do it, not that they're refusing to do it, but they would prefer to further their career. So now here we are 9, 10, 11 months after the close of WCW, and it's the Wild Wild West of the independent scene, if you will. So doing jobs and favors and business and all that, the roads were beginning to, okay, what is the next step? And I go back to what I told Andrew prior to the Savage, that whole deal is who's on the team and who's off. And when he said, oh, we need to put Steiner over. And I'm sure Scott, in Scott's so diplomatic way, told Andrew, I ain't getting beat. I don't care who's in the ring with. Yep. Okay. You're going to wrestle Jeff. Jeff will put you over. And then he probably came to me and went, and I'm like, nope, that ain't going to work.
Here's the match from the Observer. Jeff Jarrett pinned Brian Christopher to retain the title in 13-17. Crowd wasn't hot for this, but they were reasonably into it, with Jarrett having some WCW main event credibility and Christopher having the charisma coming off WWF TV. Christopher's pants fell down while he was dancing. They traded some sleepers. They had a ref bump, which at least they hadn't done up to this point. Christopher did a leg drop off the top, but there's no referee. They sent Mark Johnson out to play the face referee, and he went for the count out, but the other ref pulled him off. Then the refs started fighting each other. That comedy is exactly what wasn't needed to get the title over, although these two at a title match, that wasn't happening anyway. Jarrett hit Christopher with a guitar shot while the referees fought, and the first ref went to count, but Johnson pulled him off. Jarrett ends up getting the pin after a low blow and the stroke on the title belt, 1.5 stars. Was Brian not ready to be in the main event, or was this just, hey, we got to get a show in the ring, and the Steiner thing fell apart? I guess we should mention, Steiner was there that night. Your undercard is Nova beating, and check this talent out, Low Key, Shark Boy, AJ Styles, Tony Mamaluke, Christopher Daniels. The next match is the Funkster and Reno, and then Chronic over Native Blood. Puppet the Midget Killer, that's a thing, defeated Teo. Eddie Guerrero beat Psychosis and Juventud Guerrera. Devin Storm beat Sabu. Rick Steiner and the Cat beat the West Hollywood Blondes. And Jeff Jarrett beats Brian Christopher. So you've got quite a cast of characters here, and you rattle off some of those names like Low Key and Shark Boy and AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels. Yeah. Anyway, Brian Christopher, main event. Was he in the wrong place, you think?
Well, we were playing the hand we were dealt, and me and Brian go back, since kids, but we'd wrestle each other, hundreds of times in Memphis. And I don't remember the exact particulars, but I knew I could go out and have a match with him, and Brian never cared he never cared about winning or losing. And I can't say that he was all in on being a World Wrestling All-Star, but at that late stage and I'm still saying all the talent, not just Savage, but all the uncertainty. It's like, and the thing that I most remember about this match was Terry Taylor going, Jeff, you made the time by like 5 seconds, 7 seconds. We literally almost ran out of pay-per-view time. The lack of communication and the ref bumps, I'm sure, played a factor, or maybe they didn't. But we just, the whole is a mess. The whole, and going out that late in the show in a theater seating, whatever kind of reaction we got, we were probably lucky to have anyway. It was not a good, it wasn't a red letter day to step in the ring, really, for any of us. It is what it is, but or it was what it was. But I'm certain I was happy that the match just took place.
We're not done with pay-per-views for WWA. They would run another show April 14th in 2002. The main event of that one would be Scott Steiner beating Nathan Jones. You're not on that show. And then the main event of the December 2002 pay-per-view is Lex Luger and Sting. You're on that show, but by this point, the NWA is working with Total Nonstop Action. So you're here wrestling Nathan Jones for the NWA World Title. And the very last WWA show was in 2003. And it's Jeff Jarrett, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, taking on the WWA World Heavyweight Champion Sting. But there is a bit of a hiatus. Is this the end of you and McManus for a while after this Vegas show?
We started TNA. If I recall, that was the let's figure out how to do this. Let's take the bull by the horns and head down that road.
So he starts running he runs his next pay-per-view in April, but you're of course going to get things kicked off in June, and we're going to talk about that soon. I do want to ask, because I know that you sort of put things back together with McManus after the Vegas show. Are you guys on speaking terms? Do you say, hey, you know what? I think I had enough. I'm going to try it my own way. Or is he saying, geez, I don't know if I want to do this again. It was such a disaster. We know he does wind up running though, but that's 2 months later, but you're not on the show. So what's the falling out, or the fallout maybe is a better word?
There wasn't any like F you, none of that. It was, Andrew, I'm trying. I was hoping maybe you would hear me out a little more, but hey, I still think your theory and your vision can work, but it is not the music business. You are not hiring Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, and you're not hiring an act that go play their hits. You're dealing with talent, and I go back to, you've never done this before, and unless you've lived in this environment, you're going to have some hard lessons to learn. And he's like, yeah, I'm learning that. But I mean, it was very cordial. I don't want to say friendly, but it was cordial. And he paid me, and it was what it was. But by that time, I knew I wanted to chart my own course, or at least give it a shot. And what was the date of this pay-per-view?
February.
Yeah. April's when I had my meeting with Richard Scrushy. So when you start, thinking about the timelines of less than eight weeks later, I was going down with the business plan.
Are you still friendly and speak to McManus these days?
Yeah, we've actually had. Now here's a little tidbit. He had a home here for years that I'd fallen out of contact with him, but he kept home, and Jeremy Borash had stayed in contact with him. So, but yes, me and Andrew have had conversations. I called him a couple of years ago on a random connection to a music industry, and I was calling to pick him brain. So yes, I've we don't talk daily or weekly or monthly but yes, still a good relationship. The New Zealand pay-per-view with Sting and being a part of that, I know that was a fantastic personal experience, but that was something that I think was his swan song.
That was his last one.
Yeah. So that was by that point, now we're talking 2 years into his wrestling run. But again, he was dealing in much bigger numbers, but like a lot of folks, understanding the wrestling industry and understanding another industry, they're just not the exact same, and there's a learning curve. But look, it didn't work out for him, but to this day, I've got a lot of respect for the guy, a whole lot.
I do think it's worth mentioning that McManus made the news back in 2015, where there was apparently a misunderstanding about 300 kilos of cocaine from Mexico. And a few years prior to that, there was a mishap with a suitcase of $702,000 in cash in a Hilton hotel. Of course, any affiliation discussed in the media of him being a part of a drug syndicate is probably just rumor and innuendo. I mean, it's not like, it's implausible to think that you might have a briefcase full of cash. Maybe he just demanded his payoff from the box office in cash from the Gund Arena, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways this could happen where you have that much cash in person.
Whatever happened out of that?
It went away. He beat it. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
So yeah, 300 keys of cocaine, no problem. $702,000 in cash in a suitcase in a hotel, no problem. McManus is the real Teflon Don of wrestling. And you know what? You've got something in your man cave right around the corner in the windowsill above your couch. Why don't you show that to everybody? Can you grab that right fast?
Yeah, I'll jump up real quick.
Seriously, go get it. Show them.
I'm not going to go up and get it. My dog's right out there.
There is a memento that we have to share some other time.
There you go.
From all of this tour that when I saw it, I did a double take and thought, is that what I think it is?
There you go.
And there it is. And we're going to talk about it soon. This was fun talking about World Wrestling All-Stars, sort of the precursor. I know it feels like we went a roundabout way to talk about how TNA came to be, but I think, you've told me multiple times, if it weren't for World Wrestling All-Stars, the successes and the failures, TNA probably wouldn't have happened the way it did, right?
No. And, I'm currently reading this book about stillness, but just being still, and I'm not saying physically still, but when you're traveling on the road and, again, the summer of no worries, and then you get on a plane and fly to Australia, that's, and if you look at the timeline, 9/11. Okay. I flew next month.
Yeah.
But to back up, the week before 9/11, this is another little precursor. I was not in the Twin Towers, right across the street with my dad and Randy Savage, talking to some investment bankers. That's another piece of this puzzle of a startup wrestling company. Did you know that story, Conrad?
No.
Yeah. So that summer of no worries and having time to go out on a jet ski and drive literally, Conrad, I can get on a jet ski here and drive an hour upstream and pull over and fill the gas tank up and drive an hour back. And I did that multiple times, just cruising on a Tuesday when nobody's out, everybody's out working. So those kind of moments of reflecting and thinking on next steps, that trip to New York that me and my dad took and met with Savage, literally across the street from 9/11. And that happened, a couple of days later, going to Australia on a 16-hour plane ride, being in bus rides, flying back home, going to the UK, again, bus rides. So being in the wrestling space with talent and thinking and again, watching, that's sort of a pillar of my upbringing into this day. If I can get into an arena, and when I watch wrestling, Conrad, I don't only watch, I watch how people responding on the front row and second row and third row and behind the announcers, just seeing how people respond and being in those arenas and hearing that live color commentary from Lawler and JP and seeing, okay, here comes, I was raised on, why are you doing a guitar on the pole? But there's zero storyline to this. Okay, you're right. And cage matches are made to keep people in and out. It's got to be storyline driven. And guitar on the pole, got to be storyline driven. And all this kind of stuff. Well, that's true. But also to flip it, you can also go to a non-storyline driven wrestling fan who just wants to come out. There's a lot of folks in Nashville that say, I just want to go listen to some good live music. That's it with wrestling. Let's go watch it. And so if you first match is some high flyers and second match is a guitar on the pole and third match is this match, given that variety, it all sort of works in. So the answer to your question is for me to have the ability to sit down and ride and think, what are next steps? The thing that crystallized in my brain more than anything, and maybe we should end on this, but this is sort of the flag in the ground. I realized in those days, Vince is no longer number one. He's just not, because without a number two, there's no such thing as one. It's just wrestling on TV. And that is something that I really went, wow, there's a real opportunity here. Got to be smart about it. It ain't going to be easy, but there's an opportunity.
And there's an opportunity for you to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave us a 5-star review if you think we've earned it. And by all means, follow us on Twitter at My World Podcast. We're having a lot of fun, and we're doing lots of fun giveaways. You also want to make sure you get all these shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com, including a fun watch-along of Jeff's first ever match, wrestling Tony Falk. Next week, we're going to continue down our journey of how in the world TNA became a thing. Next week's episode is titled, Let's Start a Wrestling Promotion. We're going to do a deep dive on how it all came together, including lots of talk about Richard Scrushy. We've got something really special coming up the 2 weeks after that, but it's all TNA centric as we march towards the debut show of Total Nonstop Action. The good, the bad, and the ugly, Jeff. This has been fun. I appreciate you talking about World Wrestling All-Stars in such deep detail. I don't think that promotion has ever been covered with this much detail before today.
That's why you're the Podfather. I enjoyed it. It was a complete 180 from last week in so many ways. And this is something that on the journey of my world that I can candidly say, I envisioned these kind of conversations to peel the onion back and talked about WWA or Memphis or whatever it is, Puerto Rico. I can't wait to dive in to Puerto Rico stories, but this is what I envisioned, Conrad. And I hope you, I don't know. Does that make sense that this is what I envisioned?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. This is what I envisioned. A lot of fun.
I think we need to have Silva take some shots of that World Wrestling All-Stars memorabilia, if you will, because I feel like everybody is going to be a little more interested in that now that we've told the story. It's going to be coming soon to adfreeshows.com. Tell a friend. Until next time, he is at Real Jeff Jarrett. I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we'll see you next week right here on My World. Thank you, sir.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.